Sweet eternal balance of all the. This is the flagship episode of the Rogue Ways podcast, and the moment where four badasses come together to wax philosophical, inform pedagogical, and rant uber logical in the most chill and friendly roundtable that could possibly exist. Tonight, we're going to get deep and dirty in the untouchable realms of psychosis and shamanism while also grounding in the everyday reality of emotional and mental damage of trauma and healing. I am honored to share this time with three people I know and love. The lovely Leela Marie holds worlds together with her healing heart and hands as she mends the wounds of the weary with her work as a licensed practitioner of the TREmor method. Leela Marie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, hon.
And the sweetest of hearts, Kara Shively, is here tonight with a million lifetimes of experience working with people with various mental illnesses. Kara is an emotional alchemist and rolls through life spreading love and joy wherever she goes. Kara, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you.
And Erin Keith is a warrior in the realm of the inner. As a student of emotional responsibility, Erin brings a rational and balanced approach to all his actions and host of teachings he works to share through his own podcast, Wise. Erin, thank you for being here.
It's truly an honor to be here with you guys tonight.
Yay. So we have a pointless question of the episode, which some people who have watched the last podcast that I hosted would remember from that podcast. We're bringing it over to Rogue Ways. And the question is inspired by a random post that was in the Facebook community Eyes Open of a lovely little cow in a lovely field of sunflowers. So I'm going to ask you all, which animal would you most like in a photo shoot? And in which frivolous way would you stage the shoot? And we'll start with Erin.
Well, mine's not going to be a surprise if you know me. I would go with cats or kittens, and I've seen this before, but you know how people do newborn photo shoots?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've seen kittens and those newborn are adorable, so I would, of course, do that.
That's too cute. All right, what are you going to go with, Kara?
Well, I was gonna go with an orangutan just because they're fucking hilarious, but I need some water energy in my life today. I need to just wash some shit away. So I was thinking maybe a killer whale, and like riding on the back of a killer whale like a dolphin.
Yeah,
badass. Real tiny, and yeah, sounds good to me.
I love it. What do you think, Leela?
Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a goat lover, so I have these visions of goats like in actual climbing gear, so it makes sense like how they can navigate like being on the side of a cliff like they are.
Oh my god, I love that. That's awesome. When I was a kid, my favorite animal was the mountain goat for who knows why, but I guess I was feeling the water energy too, because I was thinking about narwhals and their big long nose horns. And which I guess is a tooth or whatever. And I really want to see them like swooping up all those little stackable hoops that kids play with, like little kids, in like somehow not a frozen atmosphere, like maybe down in the Caribbean or something. That's what I want to see in a photo shoot.
I want that to happen.
All right, so we're gonna start the episode off actually before we get into the mental, emotional, and spiritual health and all of our ideas with that. We're gonna start off with something that we're calling the white wave. We did it once before, but this is the first time we'll be doing it on Rogue Ways. So we're going to send our love out to a listener through kind of a karmic burst. And we're all going to visualize those of us listening live, whether you're listening through YouTube or you're listening later through the podcast, through iTunes or Stitcher, or if you're actually watching this through my blog at corysharman.com. No matter when you are listening to this, you can help us visualize this person and their intention. So I'm going to ask Leela to roll a die, and that will help us let fate choose the target of the intention today out of the people who wanted some love thrown their way. So
we have an odd number.
Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to visualize Brett Saylor. Brett has been struggling with insomnia lately, and he could use a few good nights sleep in a row. So we're going to visualize Brett, and we're going to visualize him sleeping deeply. And I'm going to play a little song, which will hopefully help send our intentions out into the universe. So everyone listening and everyone on the show can visualize Brett sleeping deeply for many nights in a row. Excellent. Thank you, everyone who's joining in that intention for Brett to sleep deeply. Brett, when you listen to this, if you feel it working, let us know how it went. We'd love to get some feedback on our little experiment here. So, all right. So we're going to begin here at the beginning. So I wanted to get into some personal roots because each of us has a very different probably starting place and reason for getting into either the mental, the emotional, or the spiritual work that we're doing in life, or all three. So if you can remember kind of what sent you down this path of getting more intimate with the mental, emotional, or spiritual world, what would you want to share about that? And anyone can start who feels like it.
Ladies first.
Thanks, Aaron.
I can start if you guys want.
Yeah, will you do that?
I will do that.
All right.
So I was actually just listening to Aaron's podcast, and something on your most recent episode, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but either you or Alexander was talking about how trauma and hardship kind of forces people to be stronger, maybe, or to kind of come out with their spiritual or emotional or mental strengths more quickly, maybe, or something like that. That concept kind of resonated with me because I feel like my path in life was really determined at a young age by the trauma that I went through. Not that I knew that at the time, but it's kind of like sink or swim, or trial by fire. It's like, you're either going to let it kind of overcome you and take you down, which I almost did, or you're going to rise above it and learn a lot from it. And those lessons you learn from that type of trauma, I think, kind of last forever and are really, really deep seated. And so my father actually died when I was 11. And before that, we had a lot of chaos in our household. And so I feel like that, and then just a lot of death in my life from that point forward has kind of created who I am today and made me really aware of my own emotional journey, but also definitely given me a spiritual understanding of life as well. So I think that's kind of where I started.
Awesome. I can go next if you want.
Sure.
All right. So I used to think that it was becoming aware of how brutal this incarnation could be. I remember being at my grandmother's house, and she had one of those old 70s TVs that sat on the floor, right? So it was just right at my eye level, and I was engulfed constantly with this, the race wars in Vietnam and the world at large. And, I was just so sensitive that stuff really impacted me on a deep level. And I thought that was strange, but really, as I've aged, I've realized that I have memories of being from a place that was almost utopian in comparison to this.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like my first step on the path started with incarnation, like just being conceived and just being bewildered. And like you, I had that same thing of like not really knowing that until later in life. It took a long time for that to click, for me to realize that that's what I came here to do, was walk the path.
Yeah. Well, how striking that would be to be probably unaware at that point of this utopian place you came from, but then see all of this strife and war laid out in like vivid detail.
Yeah, it just made no sense to me. Like I couldn't understand why it even occurred, let alone like why people couldn't see solutions to it. It seemed so obvious to me.
Yeah.
And there was nobody could hear it, nobody could see it. So yeah, it took a long time to realize that I had a very Pollyanna idea of like how things should be versus the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and Leela and I have talked about these things before. We really kind of click on that level. I feel very much the same about not understanding why people didn't get it from a very young age. You know, being sensitive, empathic. I didn't even know that was a thing until probably like the last 10 years. And then even still, I didn't know that was something that I was. I was, you know, I had to figure that out, ask the questions, am I, you know, of course I am. I'm feeling these things that other people feel. And it's as simple as that. And so I just assumed that everybody could do this. You know, like, why can't you just see that they're in pain, go talk to them and offer them some help, some support, and, you know, just, it's not that hard. But apparently that's not the case. I still really struggle with that. Um, but I think, you know, whether that's past life stuff or that's through, you know, traumatic childhood experience, being from a family in, you know, dysfunction, I still deal with it. But I've, you know, gained a lot of tools, and we'll talk about that later. But it definitely was, I think, something that I was supposed to, you know, experience in order to sharpen those skills, in order to make me stronger. It sucks. You know,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I deal with, you know, being overly emotional and not knowing why most of the time. And I'm still, you know, on a path of discovery as to what's mine and what's not mine. But yeah, I'm finally at a point where I'm like, oh, okay, so I've been like this all my life. There's some factors, you know, being just a sensitive kid, you know, kind of a creative weirdo, a chubby kid, you know, outcast, super shy. And that was just a recipe for me having to deal with my own stuff on my own. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
So how I got into this was actually pretty recent, and it's a little bit of a long-winded story, but I'll try to shorten it as much as possible. I have this deep-seated need for freedom. And of course, I think some of it is from Aries and my Sagittarius. I don't know if it's in the ascendant or my moon. One of them is Sagittarius and the other one's Cancer. I can't remember which one is which, but and so I never wanted to stay close to home. I never wanted to be under the watch of like my father, who always had to be like hands-on, and he was like a carpenter, and I would go build decks with him when I was really little, and he would let me do some of the things, but he would always want to like push me out of the way and show me how to do it versus me learning how to do it, you know, through experience.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that energy, I didn't want to be close to home, so he could just like drop by, and I wanted to live my own life. So I moved out here to rural Virginia, you know, 700 miles from home, and I was with my ex at the time, and we, you know, tried to homestead in this 1880s farmhouse, and there was land for sale next door, and her father's girlfriend sold her house up in Connecticut and wanted to invest it, and she saw that the land was for sale next door, and asked if I was okay with them purchasing it and possibly building, you know, like a small little dwelling for them to visit. And I said no right up front, because I felt that, because her father is a lot like my father, where, you know, they want the best and they want to help, but they're not aware of how overbearing their energy is.
You're like, I love you, but I need my space.
Yeah, exactly. So I said no, but my ex was like, I don't see what's wrong with this. This is a great thing. So she told her father's girlfriend that it was okay, and so that immediately created odds, and it created an argument, and we couldn't, you know, find a common ground on it. So we actually went to couples therapy, And that was a very cool experience for me because, coming from like the ego Aries point of view where you don't want anybody telling you, like even it's just a male thing, there's always a resistance for somebody looking at your life or sharing things, being open like that. But was trained in Zen and the normal counseling or therapy. I'm not really sure what his exact label was, but he was really good at asking questions that would get you to look at things differently. He didn't offer any tools, but it was always the questions. And through our experience, we realized that I just couldn't have compassion for her. And I know that that's a really tough thing to realize when you're there and you're with somebody for 3 years and you realize that she's crying and you don't have compassion for her and you don't know why, but we realized that we were just really good friends and not good at being in a relationship. So we were able to mutually break that off, and we're still friends.
I think that's an incredible story in itself. Like you recognizing that about yourself and being capable of admitting it, and then you two moving on in a positive way is kind of unheard of almost.
We actually helped each other dating, like 4 or 5 months later. So it is a cool story, and we had aspirations to write a book, but now she's married, living in England, and is pregnant. So she's definitely moved on with her life, grounding way.
Amazing.
But this whole experience actually got me to look at myself, and before I never considered looking at like being into self-help stuff. I never thought this would be me. So so this got me looking for just like a philosophy that I could follow. I didn't know who I was at the time. I was just trying to find something after the breakup. And I found Eckhart Tolle's stuff. I loved the conceptual end of it, but it wasn't practical enough for me. And one thing that always irks me about politicians and why I love Ron Paul is because no politician except Ron Paul had a underlying philosophy that any issue could be held to, and then you could derive your own answer. Everything nowadays is whatever their opinion is, or whoever's giving them more money, they're gonna. So you ask them a question, and one day it might be with this answer, the next day it might be the opposite. There's no rhyme or reason why they believe things. There's no philosophy, and that's
so
when through a chance. Through a chance encounter, I met Alexander, and he would do his sound journeys, and then we would have this just open talk, and I heard him just share his philosophy. And at the time, I didn't know it was a philosophy. I just thought he was sharing his opinions. And I was just blown away. And at that point, I was just entering into the social scene after being, not long, just a long-term relationship and living here away from society and working from home, that I was just socially awkward. I didn't know how to interact with people, how to make friends. And so I was just needing information and how to interact with the world and how to conduct myself. And so he had answers, and that's how we became friends. And I learned, that he had a whole philosophy, that there is a foundation, that it's all based on wellness of self and everybody around. So if that is something that you aspire to, then any issue that you have, you can hold to the foundation and get your own answer. You don't need somebody telling you their opinion or vice versa. So I know that's really long-winded, but short answer is I never saw myself here. A couple years ago.
That's such an amazing story too, because I think, like you said, you didn't see yourself here, and here you are, and different from the rest of our stories as well, but also underscores that I think a lot of people, it's like we don't teach emotional, mental, or spiritual health in school. And if you don't get it from your family, which most people don't, where do you get it? You don't find it on TV. You don't find it, in the news. Like, this is not part of our culture to dig into these things and to promote them. And so, and a lot of people need guidance in that and don't find it, I think. And then where they do find it is often a really misleading place, I think. People who are maybe going to offer something that looks like health, but is actually like a cult or something.
What's that?
So I like that you have experience in that process. I mean, we all do, but that you underscored that. So what do you guys see, since we're talking about all three, emotional, mental, and spiritual health? like if we're talking about all three at once, how are we differentiating between them? Or what do you see as the difference between the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual?
I broke it down and wrote some notes, so I'll just read those if that's okay.
That'd be great.
So mental I saw as expanding the mind to integrate personal and social spiritual experiences, a desire to learn, improve, and seek knowledge, wisdom, and beauty, as well as things we often try to avoid, like emptiness and darkness. Emotional is understanding and coping with the challenges of life, the ability to be with and respond to it, as well as share in the spectrum of emotions in a productive manner. The dark ones and the not so dark ones. And then spiritual, establishing and allowing harmony in our lives. I see this as a balance of keeping your own house in order and allowing space for the mystery and the chaos to have its place as well. A foundation laid for authentic values that inform our actions and hopefully can unite us on a whole as an individual and on our path with others.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of went in for like, oh, wait, I need to flesh out what these words actually mean. Like we say things so often, and sometimes I just like to slow it down and be like, okay, let me look up what the actual, description of that word is, the meaning of that word.
I think it's really important if we're going to have a whole discussion that we have some sort of basis in what each of those is. And that was a very thorough response. Do you guys want to add anything?
I think I have more of a visceral definition. It comes from, just the experience,
right?
What it feels like. And that's kind of where I come from, is, an energy-based experience. So the emotion, of course, is what arises, or what reaction do I have to a certain stimulus or situation or thought. Spiritual, well, I'll go with mental, because that's kind of the next thing that I consider, and that's, of course, thoughts. And I can differentiate between emotion and thought, but I've found that a lot of people aren't that aware that those two differ. Thought for me is purely what's going through my brain, like that, that chatter, that constant like information processing. But there's also emotion being processed with that. So I understand why it's completely confusing if you're new to actually thinking about it as a thing, rather than like, oh, this is happening to me. But it's a different feeling. It's literally a different vibration. And then the spiritual is, for me, I don't know that it's necessarily a combination of those two, and like on a higher plane. But I mean, for me, spiritual is pretty simple. It's just a connection to something bigger than myself.
Yeah, nice. I actually think you and I have, I think, similar ways of looking at it, because I was thinking along the same lines. Like our mental is our mind, the thoughts that we have, the facts, even this like sensory data maybe. And then the emotional is like feelings. And again, like you said, I think that a lot of people confuse those two. And I did and didn't know it. I thought I was very aware of emotions. And then I went to therapy and realized that I did not have any idea how I was feeling ever. I only knew what I thought about things. So I had to train myself to get in touch with my emotions, which was an incredible life-changing process. Every single person who knows me knows how much I changed when I went through that. Not changed, but maybe became more of myself. And same, like what you said, Kara, with spiritual, I think is something kind of bigger than your ego, at least beyond you, and yet somehow kind of more you than anything else that you can kind of experience or communicate in this world. Maybe it's really hard for me to nail down exactly how to describe the spiritual, but I have this idea that you can't really get to the spiritual experience without first having maybe order isn't even really the right word, but maybe like calm in your mental and emotional worlds is a better way to describe it.
Definitely.
And I broke mine down very quick and dirty. And, this, I'm not saying this is everything, but this is just how I quickly decipher them. To me, the emotional part, I like to borrow the term pain body from Eckhart Tolle, which is basically the ego, but it's like that small little person inside of you, that small child that I guess through deep healing you would try to interact with and tell little Aaron that it's going to be okay from your childhood. So the pain body or ego would be emotional. The mental is dealing with logical, and I also put the subconscious programming on this level as well, which I really think that there is a level of our mental that is not us. It's part of I like to use the word associations.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, you watch a movie and somebody gets murdered by somebody with a hook, then like the rest of the night you're looking over your shoulder thinking there's a hook guy coming after you. So,
or if you see a hook, you're going to have a fear response or something.
Yeah, exactly. So that I don't like to say that is me thinking that, but that is an association that I picked up along the way, and I would put that. I mean, that's emotional and mental, because an emotional reaction to that is what stores it. But and then the spiritual, like you guys, I mean, to me, the soul, or whether that's the connection between those two, up for debate.
Yeah, they're all interpretable, and I was wondering how this question was going to go, because I think it would be really easy to disagree about the definitions of these three things, but it sounds like we're all pretty much on a similar page, so that makes it easier. So when we're talking about kind of moving on from where we started and how we define things, what sort of learning process did you guys have to go through to initially travel down a path of awareness and work within the realm of the emotional, the spiritual, or the mental? Or if you want to combine all three in what you do, then you can tackle it that way as well.
For me, it was trauma in childhood. There was a lack of tangible support, understanding, presence to help me navigate and not get overwhelmed or stuck with the things that were coming up for me. This created a lot of feelings of bewilderment and excessive emotion that was often met with shame, abuse, abandonment, isolation. And the mental concepts that others had based on their own upbringing and trauma were things that I took on, and it framed my appropriate emotional reactions to the mental defects of others to cope and feel like I was belonging. It left me open to a lot of spiritual exploitation in many forms. And initially I developed an acquiescent demeanor to cope with that. And over time it developed into this just rage. So both extremes blinded me to my connection with source. And over time I lost the ability to tolerate the intolerable. So that helped me put my energy into finding solutions. And I looked into multiple healing modalities to do that over most of the course of my life.
Thank you.
I think, like I said earlier, dealing with childhood trauma and not knowing where to put that, how to use it. I was never outwardly vocal. I always, and still do, as a, knee-jerk reaction to a lot of situations. Still, working through my own stuff. I internalize like heavily, like everything's my fault. Every reaction somebody has is, because of me, because I'm so important. Yet I'm not, that's kind of how I don't know that I learned how to process it like that, or if I was just naturally, that's just the way I've always been. I don't really understand that or understand why. But I know it, right? So
Right.
I at least know it enough to be able to work with it.
Can I offer an observation real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. The reason I think that we develop that pattern is because it's necessary for survival.
Right.
Because when you're a child, your brain can't conceptualize that anything else is a problem, because that's so fucking terrifying that you feel completely unbalanced. So you have to internalize it and think that it's you. So you do become that like center of, and children are, I mean, that's how they are. That's how we're born. That's how we process. So it was survival technique.
Huh. It's really interesting.
See, we're still learning.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is just the beginning, right? Even though I've been doing this for years and years, eventually, growing up as a teenager, I didn't act out. I still internalized stuff. I was kind of, well, and still am in an arrested development about a lot of things. Still kind of childish in a lot of my reactions and the way that I deal with things internally. Externally, I may be able to like put on this front, and that's probably my Capricorn rising or ascending that I've just learned about, trying to, just being like, I'm totally cool, I'm put together, but inside I'm a fucking mess. But so, being on my own as an adult, trying to figure things out, I was kind of always, and still am, like the sick one, in the family of dysfunction. There's several roles that you play, or that different people play in a family of dysfunction in order to make that dysfunction work and to survive. Um, and so, I'm the scapegoat. I'm always, the crazy one, the sick one, the one who's going to call it out. So I'm drawing attention to myself that way, but that's just who I am. So, eventually it's like, Kara, you're really depressed. What's wrong with you? So what's wrong with you?
You have to
That's
carry it
been,
for everyone. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
This is kind of like a
been
gaslighting.
Yeah, that's my whole life. Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? Like, still, what's wrong with you, Kara? And it's really heavy. I, started in my early 20s, not realizing that it was normal to feel, depressed, but not that I was wrong for feeling that way. Like that was just the way things were. Any friends I had, like, oh, you're depressed, that's terrible. Like now I'm like, fuck you, it's not terrible, it's normal. Like in society, if you're not anxious or depressed or, fucking livid about things, then you're asleep.
Or you're suppressing or repressing or
Exactly.
avoiding.
So, I was on antidepressants from my early 20s to, recently, and, in and out of therapy. I can probably, well, I know I can. That's why I don't go to therapy anymore, because I can talk circles around and convince any therapist that I'm going to do what they think that I need to do, even though I know it's not what I need to do. So fuck you. It's just, it's exasperating to have to deal with the system the way that it is, because it's set up to help people in only a certain way. And I've figured out that I'm just so special. Not really. I just, I understand things on a whole different level. So I know that I know what the deal is. I can see behind the curtain. I can see what you're doing as you're writing me a new prescription for a new antidepressant. So, that's kind of where I come from. And then through several experiences with like bad, horrible relationships with addicts, of course, because I'm an addict magnet. And, at first it was like, I had no idea that was a thing. And come here, let me fix you. But eventually that actually was a good thing. It got me into support groups like Al-Anon, for friends and family of addicts, alcoholics, mainly in my experience. But that was actually a very pivotal and life-changing experience. And I still carry, a lot of the concepts especially how to create boundaries, healthy boundaries. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
You didn't know you could tell
me.
people to respect what you need.
Yeah. Like, I didn't know I could tell people, no, I really don't want to do that right now. Or, no, I don't want to fix you. Or, it was completely foreign to me. So all of these experiences, I've gotten things out of, I've learned from and have grown. Some of them are horrible. Some of them, just when other people ask me about them, I'm pretty, I joke about it because to me it's funny anymore because that's just kind of how I deal with it. But also it is actually kind of funny that I thought it was so horrible at the time, and now I survived. I'm still here.
Mm.
So,
and dare I say, you love yourself.
I do.
Yay.
You're gonna
That's
make
the
me
best.
fucking cry.
Pass the tissue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a very, very hard fought battle that I still fight every day. Yeah.
I mean, that's like a really huge strength of your story too, though, is like a lot of people can relate that not enough of us love ourselves, let alone each other enough,
Yeah.
I think. And that's part of why our society is so sick, as we're looking for this constant validation from the outside to tell us we're good enough. And yeah, and again, if you find that from the wrong source, it's destructive. You really need to fulfill it for yourself in order to find anything productive.
Yeah, and when you don't get that validation, then some people turn to substances to numb. I mean, not just for that, but also for trauma. But I just want to point out how awesome Kara's shirt is. I just noticed it.
Did you finally figure it out?
Bad.
In honor of Aaron and all my cat-loving friends.
Well, and I noticed your cat
kittens.
in your
bookshelf. He's being bad. He was like trying to knock stuff over, so that's why people can see me turning and looking, and so I just wanted to show them that there's nothing weird going on there. It's just a cat.
He's pouting in the corner. He needs his own emotional process.
So, I mean, I'm going to be short on this one because I was so long on the first question, because you guys learned how I got here. But I mean, every day is a learning process. It's just consistency of effort is what I strive to do. And, sooner or later, you're going to get better at the things you're exercising. So, and practicing. So, I mean, if you're practicing not getting frustrated when certain things happen, like when my cats start chasing each other and one of my cats does the whole like pitched, and that annoys the hell out of me. I haven't mastered that yet, but yeah, just consistency of effort every day. And I think I don't think I would have been as open to everything if I didn't go through the conspiracy stuff beforehand. So of course I went the Alex Jones way, the fear-based way, and I was brought up Catholic. So I think that played a part, because I hated that because of how fear-based it was, how many rules there were, and again but I think that Alex Jones was so attractive because of that fear-based, which is so weird, but I think
it's like, if that's what you knew, that would feel comfortable.
Exactly. Even though I rejected it, it was like I don't want to say comfortable, but familiar. And so I jumped right into that, and it took me a couple of years, and David Wilcock, of all people, to to finally send me a message that said, love is the way. And I realized that if I'm spreading fear, even if it's the truth, if I'm spreading fear to people, I'm doing something wrong. Some people can we can discuss that, and I'd be happy to talk about it more, even if it's outside of here. But that was a realization that I had, because at the time I had a website where I was just aggregating like InfoWars articles and things like that.
Right.
And like Kara, pushing it on my family and my friends, and I became the obnoxious one. People were unfriending me, like my aunt, my godmother unfriended me for a while, and I was like, what? what did I do? But it was because just posting constant stuff. So, and I have more to say on that a little bit later with other questions that we'll probably get into, but just the whole conspiracy realm of opening my mind. I kind of went like step by step by step. Like my mind just kept getting blown more and more. Every time I was like, man, if like, I remember thinking this and saying this out loud to people with the whole InfoWars thing. I remember them talking about Zionists and all that crap. And I'm like, man, if the whole Patriot movement, if there's something beyond that, I just can't handle it. And I just can't do it. And then something else opened my mind and blew my mind. And I got past Alex Jones stuff and get into, I don't know, even remember. And then I was like, man, this is the top level. I can't imagine anything being beyond that. And then mind blown again. And then flat earth. And then, man, you know, all these things pile, just keep going. And I'm still like, man, if there's anything bigger than this, I just can't handle it. And I'm just wondering what's going to be next.
Make it stop.
You're like telling the universe, like, this is a limit. And the universe is like, I ain't got no limits.
Yeah. They just laugh at
Just
you.
watch.
That's awesome. I guess for me, and maybe I mentioned a little bit of it, but part of my very traumatic childhood was I was instantly put into counseling at a really young age. I don't even remember how many counselors I've had, but kind of like Kara was saying, like nothing really helped because I knew exactly how to manipulate everything and make anyone think what I wanted them to think about me. And sometimes I used it for actually processing emotions, and I got some really good tools. And the number one tool, I always give a shout out to my sixth grade counselor, Chris Wick. If you're ever going to listen to this, she knows I've told her a million times that she told me, maybe you can write some of this down. And I was like, what? Like just write like what I'm thinking? And she's like, exactly. Just write it. Just journal. I was like, oh, okay. And so I started writing, and I'm a writer now. So that obviously changed my life and was really powerful. Gave me, you know, someone to listen to any of my deepest, darkest secrets, which was really just myself. And then eventually I got a therapist that, I guess it wasn't so much that I wouldn't have been able to manipulate her as that I was finally ready. I had lived enough disappointing experiences that I wanted to stop. And I finally acknowledged that I had to probably change something dramatic in order for these experiences to stop. You know, I was like, oh, I don't want to date assholes anymore. And I don't want to keep doing drugs all the time. And I don't want these things anymore. But I actually don't know how to not do those things. So I found a therapist who was harder to manipulate. And I was actually finally ready to be really, really honest. And so I got a lot of the tools and knowledge and understanding that I have now from that. But I think Aaron said, I don't think you're ever done. And I think all of us would agree with that this is an ongoing process forever. In fact, if you ever think you're done, you're probably going to get sorely disappointed really, really quickly.
Yeah, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah. One more false limit, the universe will smash.
And, you know, we're all sharing stories about our experiences, and it seems like maybe we had a choice, but I would also question that. I mean, when you look at astrology and, you know, the two systems that I really like is the human design system and the destiny card system, which are both based on astrology and numerology. But I mean, I've shared some of it with, I mean, actually all of us here have had some glimpses into like the destiny cards and the human design.
Yeah.
And it's astrology. And when you look at it, sometimes you question whether you actually have a choice. Like, what is our real free will? Maybe our free will is to choose who is playing the roles in our lives or what is playing the roles in our lives. But so, you know, maybe, you know, like if I was with somebody and it was bringing out my anger, I could break up with them and be like, you're making me angry. But somewhere down the line, somebody else is going to evoke that same reaction in me. And so maybe in that way we can choose who we're going to play this out with. But other than that, I think we're going to have to go through these energies. I mean, I don't know if there's a short way.
That kind of ties into the next question, which is about kind of the disillusionment that we find along the way, because one of the illusions I've been disabused of very heavily recently, it's always been a question in my mind, like what you're talking about is how much free will do we have? It seems to me like I have ultimate free will and I do whatever I want all the time. But I recently, and I've talked about this a few times, so I'm sorry if some of these listeners are bored by now, but I recently found a birth chart analysis that I did when I was very young, and it was uncannily right about my life and to details that are abnormal. It's not just something where you could say like that fits many people's lives. It doesn't fit very many people's lives, or if any, besides mine. And so it does make me wonder like how much free will I have. And we don't have to get into the details, but Aaron and I went through an experience recently where I'm sure we both thought we were behaving, you know, in perfect accordance with our whatever free will. But afterwards, when we looked at the destiny cards that like Aaron's talking about, it was again uncanny how specific it was to that exact situation. And I do wonder now how much choice we really have, other than that we can practice our responses and try to choose our perceptions. Who knows? But that does lead into the question, what for you guys, what sorts of major disillusionment have you found along this path, especially earlier on, or what sorts of kind of big aha moments have you had along the way that were maybe not what you expected?
I love aha moments. And I've had plenty of them, but when I was thinking about this question, the thing that came back to me was how often I had them when I attempted to be a part of a family or a community. Because of the patterns that I established in my childhood, it was really difficult for me to develop a secure attachment and make good choices. So I kept going into abusive relationships and situations. So I'd cycle through like friendships and church and the gay community and intellectual communities, awkward communities, conspiratorial communities, you know, just trying to find some place that I fit. But not fitting was also a good thing because it kept bringing me back to me. Because most of the times that I would try to belong somewhere, it felt like there was a requirement to drink the Kool-Aid, to be a part of it, and I wasn't willing to compromise that part of myself. I liked being alone. But it made it difficult to kind of suss out what normal is, which could be part of the problem because there isn't a normal, but I think there's something closer to fine that I was looking for. So now I just try to make sure that I'm sussing out whether I'm coming from a place of strength or trauma response. And this coupled with being hugely sensitive to the energies of other people and understanding that, you know, with the use of human design and especially human design, just like seeing my chart and noticing that my mind is like completely open. My mind spirit is just like completely open. So I absorb everything around me, and I really have to. I didn't realize that for multiple years, so that made life kind of a living hell. And lots of doubt and tail chasing. But once I was able to figure that out, I'm like, okay, I can. Initially, it was like I would withdraw, like, fuck you, I'm moving to Canada, you know, like that kind of a thing. But now it's like, okay, I can take some time and go take a nap or go take a walk or, you know, go on a vacation, something to like just disconnect myself from the din of everything going on around me and figure out what I feel and who I am.
Come on, Kara, don't be shy.
Well, I'm looking at my notes. I'm trying to figure out where we are.
Aha moments.
It was just what sorts
Okay.
of major disillusionment did you find along the path?
Right. So, I think continuing with my story of, you know, my own personal experience with quote unquote mental, you know, being labeled as mentally ill, right? Like deep, deep depression, something that, you know, you can't function normally in society with. I did for many years and I did pretty well, but internally I was dead. I was dying. It was horrible. I still deal with it. But, you know, the realization, that aha moment that that it's a gift is fucking amazing.
Oh, nice.
I like about the time that the this group came together, right before, I was having probably the worst depressive moment of my whole life. And I'd been like on an even like this is normal depression pretty much, for the last 20 years, just like functioning. And I'd lost my job like about 3 years ago, dealing with, when are you going to get a job, Kara? When are you going to be normal? When are you going to do, things like normal people? And through that, I was like, I don't ever want to be normal again. I don't ever want to have a job where I have to sacrifice my soul, because that's exactly what that is. That's why I was like, that's probably what led to me, losing my job. Like, honestly, I was probably trying so hard that I was failing at the same time.
Some level of self-sabotage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I tried to get jobs half-heartedly, and then I'd be turned down, and then get really upset because, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But secretly I was like, yes. And finally, when I had gotten up enough courage to be comfortable with finding a job that I thought was going to be great, full-time benefits, right? Like, that's such a gift, like, or that's such a big deal. Anymore, I have to remind myself that that is not what I need to be looking for. That's kind of a red flag if I'm looking for that, because that just leads me to disappointment. So basically, I applied for the job. I was awesome, and I got turned down. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why am I not good enough? Right? And then, I just deep, dark depression. Like, I just did not even want to, I couldn't even deal anymore. And from that point on, I was just like, whatever, even more disillusioned that I had become in the period of like awakening to the fact that there are controllers in this world that I have no control of. There are, entities in this world that most people aren't aware of. They don't want to be aware of. They will tell me I'm crazy because I know about it, and I want to talk about it because I will call it out. And I just, I was like, I went full tilt crazy, right? Like, that's the point when I went full tinfoil hat. And I was just like, what the fuck ever. I'm just going to say whatever I want. And things started changing.
So that was this like moment of freedom when you let go of it all.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Get it.
And I've always had like this, like, my biggest fear is being without a support system, right? And I remember in my like late 20s, I was terrified of like pursuing a dream, like of being a creative, of not having a 9 to 5. Like, nobody I know personally in my life at that time had anything like that. And I didn't know how to look at it. I didn't know how to like not live without, full medical and dental benefits. Like, even though I don't need dental. My dad's a dentist, but so it's like that kind of like normalcy. Like, you have to like do things a certain way, or terrible things will happen. But I had some people in my life at that time plant some seeds and say, you know what, it's like being in the middle, between two trapeze swings. Like, you're in the middle of that. You're just waiting to grasp the other one. But guess what? There's a net. The universe will catch you. And I didn't believe it at the time. And that was my net.
Nice.
So yeah, disillusionment with everything else, but then also massive like awakening, and I mean, just like bursting with joy that holy fuck, it's happening,
Awesome.
Like, you guys are part of my life now, and it's like more amazing than I can verbalize.
Well, and I love that lesson that it's not like you had to force some sort of like, well, I'm depressed, but at least such and such, but that you actually have treasure there, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. But I think once you're honest enough about how deeply, I'm not going to say like how terrible, a situation is, because I don't want to label it as that. It felt terrible at the time, but only because other people labeled it that way.
Mhm.
I was sad and I was upset and I felt terrible at times, but as a whole, it wasn't a terrible time. It was deep. It was excruciating. But um, if you allow yourself to feel that and name it and talk about it, um, there's a back door.
Yeah. What's
Absolutely.
that? I feel like we've talked about this a lot in this group too, is that like darkness or that dark side, and people fear it, but when you get into it deeply, you realize that there's something beautifully profound in there, and that is at least half of all that exists, right? So
Yeah,
you're missing out if you fear it and you never go there, you're missing out on a lot.
absolutely.
And
What made your
it's so easy. I'm sorry. It's so
no, go
easy
for it.
to get stuck in those areas if you don't have the mindset that, I mean, we could say, this is just no way to say it, but everything is in divine order and everything is happening for a reason, or is setting us up for the next hurdle or the next experience or issue that's going to hopefully do something beyond that. I think, I mean, I'm guilty of this as well. I don't remember to keep that in mind. And sometimes I can get into a I've never been like full on depressed, but semi-depressive state if I forget reminding myself of some of these things, and I just accept the world. And in a way, you're thinking like it's just chaos, and everything happening is chaos, and everything's just happening to me, and I'm not essentially responsible for what's happening to me. So I think it's easy, just adding on to Kara based on what she said, and just to add something to everybody listening. If you think of everything as, like we were just talking about the astrology and the anything like that, if you think of it as we're meant to do these things, then it's almost like a challenge versus, a woe is me type of thing.
Yeah. And I think there's this strength you get from going into that darkest place where you have what you feel like maybe is no power at all, and you still choose to go into it and through it, and you come out the other side and you realize like there is something in you that is unbreakable. And I think that's part of what you were saying, Aaron, about like the divine, for me at least, that's how it feels, is that there's a divine presence in you, if that's not the exact same thing as a divine plan for you. And that really nothing can touch this or break it. And I think that's one of the things that I had to realize. And one of the illusions that I lost was that there was something that mattered besides the divine part of me, because there really is nothing. And when you get down to that, it can give you a lot of courage. You can be like totally fearless. Not that that's easy, but I think one of the things that, to bring it back to a more practical place, that I had to lose, that I was it was really hard for me. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the difference between thoughts and emotions, was that the idea that you could I had these mental checklists, like, oh, I'm going to get this type of a house in this type of a place. And or even before that, it was like, well, I'm going to graduate high school and then I'm going to go to this college and then I'm going to like drive this kind of car. I'm going to get this kind of job. And, I have all these things, and that you could achieve all of these things and still not have emotional satisfaction. There was this idea I had that this list of, and it's not necessarily even like a material thing, but it's like that there's this list of ideas that we have, and you can check all those boxes and it doesn't equate to happiness or security or any of those things. That was a huge illusion that I had to lose. Again, through therapy is what helped me do it. But yeah, that's one of the major illusions for me that I dispensed with at some point. And then the gift in that is that I've learned that our emotions are a much better guide than our thoughts.
Oh yeah.
That's a good point.
So I want to ask you guys, as you're traveling these journeys in life, what sustains you through, everyone's going to have problems, issues, hiccups, as we've experienced together in this group and in our lives in general. And so what kind of sustains you to keep on these paths, even when it's hard?
Honestly, for me, it's bitching.
That's awesome. I love that.
And I try to break it down to like a processing too. Like I process a lot in talking. I think it's a female thing, little girls like yak, 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 yak. But for me, I'm in constant dialogue with myself, with God, with people that I trust. And sometimes that can be functional and sometimes it can be pathological. So I've got this new theory that when we bitch, we get a dopamine hit. And it helps down regulate that frustration and overwhelm that we have. But if we get addicted to that and habitually unload our stress on other people, we're not paying attention to what really needs to be worked on. So I try to make sure that I'm looking at what's my motivation for sharing this? What do I hope to get out of this? And I do think that that's where I've been able to bring in a more functional connection with other people. It's like, okay, there's a person I can trust, and I also trust this person to call me on my shit. So I'm just gonna for a little while, and then I'm gonna check myself and see if I'm addicted to that cycle or if I'm actually processing through something and getting to the other side of it.
Nice. I love that. It's like a super practical approach too. So thank you for that.
And thanks to everyone who lets me bitch.
It totally works too. I've tried.
Yeah, I liked that you talked about people who that will call you out on your shit, because to me that's what a real friend does. And I always struggle with this concept of loyalty, because my idea of loyalty growing up was, if you have your boy who's loyal to you and you do something wrong, like you're in a bar and you mouth off to this guy is your boy is going to fight your battle, even though you were probably totally in the wrong.
No.
I hate that. I hate that. I want somebody who, if I'm wrong, they're going to tell me I'm wrong. And whether that's in private or whatever, I mean, maybe they'll stick up for me here. They're not going to get in a fist fight for me, because I'm not getting in a fist fight for somebody else's BS. But but I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that is important. And a lot of people like friends who will just tell them what they want to hear, and then the moment they call them out on something, they're the worst person in the world. So maybe people out there, just think about who are potentially your real friends, or even in the past, and maybe you shut them out because they told you something you didn't want to hear.
Oh yeah, I hope not. I think also, though, you can have I think you're absolutely right, and it's such a precious gift if you have a friend that you can be vulnerable enough with to have them call you on your shit and still I don't know, be okay. But you can have, I think, good friends and close friends who don't know how to call you on your shit.
Yeah.
Right? I guess it's not everyone, I think, is
different
capable.
level of a friend. Yes. Yeah.
But they still love you, and maybe someday.
My concept, like my type of like good friend that I would consider that. Like, I want that level of vulnerability with at least one person in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's another thing. Well, maybe we can talk about that later. Never mind. So yeah, I guess, Kara, did you say what sustains you through the hard places and the hiccups?
I'm trying to focus on my notes here and gather kind of a relevant answer to go with the flow. I think so. Okay, I don't know that I really answered it in a way that's useful to anybody else. I know I can say that I know that I feel a deep peace and contentment. I don't know that anybody else feels that once, they get to a point where I am, anyways, that I can trust that that's going to happen. through, you know, all of the things that I've done, there were so many times where I was like, oh, fuck, this is horrible. This is, you know, like the worst feeling in the world. I catastrophize. Things in my head are so much worse than they actually are. And they turn out sometimes terrible, but not as bad as they are in my head. But that's real to me in my head. Those emotions, those thoughts, those are real to me, even though they're not real. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter how bad I make it, and no matter how bad it actually is, there's some peace on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those lessons that I've learned without fail have forced me to grow.
Yeah.
And I'm hard-headed as fuck. I need to be like, I've literally had so many paradigm changes in my life because I was forced to. You know, I was super sick. I had to have surgery. I had to have my colon removed. You know, like that's all emotional stuff that I had to deal with or die. You know, and
Literally.
you know, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. And other situations that were, you know, not good. I've lost friends. I've, you know, pissed people off. I get, you know, super like obnoxious when I'm in pain and uncomfortable. And I have to work, you know, I know that I still need to work on that shit, but I know that there's something on the other side now. Before, so the distinction I'm trying to make is for so long, I didn't believe that there was something on the other side, like I talked about earlier. I didn't believe it. Now, I'm kind of like, you know what? I survived so much shit that no matter how horrible, you know, I was like crying, you know, 4 hours ago about things that I don't even know why I was crying about, you know, like feeling the deepest, like, sadness that I could feel, and I'm not even sure why. Feeling like it would never, you know, it would never end. But I'm still here, and I'm still here after all of that, and I still will be here.
And I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like what I would call faith.
Yeah,
you know,
I didn't have that for so long. I mean, I grew up, you know, with not super like Christian-y, you know, parents, and but certainly that kind of small town background.
well, I think this is why this conversation, I think, is really important, not to like feel self-important, but because I think that we have some religion in the world, and that gives people some faith, but I dare say that this type of faith that we're trying to describe here is more profound, because it's internal and it comes from you, not from this outside source that's telling you to have it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, it's personal and it comes from within. That's all I need.
Dude, and that's probably the most sustaining, I think, you know, through any hiccup that'll take you.
Yep.
And I guess what I would have described about myself is pretty much the same thing, but I have some practices where I go to remind myself of that kind of deep and abiding peace that you're talking about, or this faith that, if that's what you want to call it. And for me, it's going out into nature. And my acupuncturist actually just told me that they're trying to prescribe this to people now and call it earthing. And I know we've all heard of earthing. This practice is not new, but they're actually like writing prescriptions to people to try to get them to do it. And I did this instinctually because I grew up in a very rural area. And as a child, that was kind of what I did accidentally in moments of frustration or despair or whatever, is I'd go out into the fields or the forest and hang out by myself. And I still do that now. I run out to some, you know, lake up in the mountain and go floating far, far, far away from humans. And that's where I kind of reconnect and kind of ground. And it sounds, I think, to some people like how silly, but if you actually go try it truly, like by yourself, I think it's an amazing way to reconnect with that and get through pretty much anything.
It's my favorite thing in the world.
It
Yeah,
is. And I know
there's
it's not something everyone can do. Not everyone has access to that, but as much as possible, I think a good practice.
there's
That's
a
what I
Japanese
was waiting
term.
for.
There's a
Sorry, go
Japanese
ahead.
term called Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we
So
need it.
if you don't mind, I'm just gonna jump in because I didn't get a chance to say mine because I'm just
Oh, I'm
trying to keep
sorry.
the conversation flowing, and
Yeah,
so
my
sometimes you may
bad.
have misinterpreted me just adding on to somebody as my answer, but
Sorry.
it's not a problem. Now where were we? Okay, so well, what sustains me is knowing that this is a lifelong process and that there's nowhere I need to be right now. And to keep the judgment off myself. I think we're real good at, once we learn about not judging people, we're real good at keeping the judgment off other people, but then we just bring it all internal. And it does probably more damage when you judge yourself more than others, I think. And that goes hand in hand with realizing that the work is a lifelong process, and you still need to have self-discipline if you want to do this, but just realizing that there's no steps there, and there's no end,
Yeah.
like we talked about. I mean, maybe there is at some point, many lifelines down the road, that maybe that's what they call ascension, and just realizing that everything is in cycles, and you can look at the astrological cycles, the energetic cycles. So what's happening now, what energy you're in now, is not going to be the rest of your life. So if you're willing and open to change, then you're going to be more able to get the lessons that you're supposed to be getting now. And these lessons will probably be a lot easier than what they could be if you're trying to be, hardcore in your stance and not wanting to give. I did want to say to Kara, I'm glad, or I want to point out to the audience that she said, or contentment, and she didn't say happiness. So I thought that was very cool of her to say that, because happiness is an emotion, and it's a high, and the highs can be just as detrimental as the lows. And when you're somebody who experiences large highs, through the laws of polarity, you're probably going to also experience large lows. So I think the key is to keep your emotions as close to neutral as possible as you grow. And I'm not saying that you will need to suppress your emotions, but as you grow and become more wiser, your emotions gradually, come closer where you realize that there's cost of getting ecstatic versus, being happy where you're here at like a 70 instead of the. Hopefully that makes sense to people out there.
Can you repeat that real quick? You kind of, it got metallic for a second.
Okay. Yeah, no, because I see
bit.
you moving, but Lindsay is frozen for me.
Oh.
So hopefully, okay, there you are. Okay, there we go.
Like
Okay.
an Egyptian.
No, I was just saying, in my perspective, we want to try to keep our emotions as close to neutral to avoid the cost. So if I win the lottery and I'm ecstatic, and that's like on a scale of 100 to 0 and 50 is neutral, I'm at 100, there's probably going to be a low through the laws of polarity that I'm going to have to go through, because I'm opening myself to these large swings in emotions. And I think that as we gain wisdom and as we do this work, our emotions gradually come closer to that 50% mark. And I'm not preaching that we need to suppress our emotions, but once you become aware of the cost of your emotions, the cost of getting so happy or the cost of getting so sad, you realize there's a cost on your body. There's an energetic cost. Want to those emotions, and when you become more in touch with them, you can catch those responses as they come, and then process them and output them in different ways. So if you're angry, instead of punching a wall and breaking your hand, you can go for a jog or play a contact sport. So you're just rerouting that energy, but also respecting it as a response to something in your experience.
Making room for it, not letting it run you over. Or other people over.
Yeah, because again, there is a cost to it. Like if I punch the wall, I mean, not only am I having a physical cost, but then I'm doing a lot of physical harm to my body through all that stress I'm putting, going through those, that emotion of being angry and maybe also swearing at people and saying things that I don't mean to the people I love and, hurting my relationships, not communicating the best. So there's that. And I did also want to just go back and talk about my major disillusionment. And I wanted to just mention it because it's something we all know. And it's how conspiracies, or I've come to the conclusion that conspiracies are really just a distraction because they're all externally focused or pulling us externally with our attention. Mm-hmm. And in our group, we kind of all come to the conclusion that what really, really matters to change is the internal. So that's why I derive at that conclusion. I love conspiracies because it's entertaining to me, and I like to know what's going on in the world, and I like to just have deep-seated knowledge and gain perspectives. But we talk about conspiracies all day, but what conspiracies have we actually changed or altered? I mean, there's probably very few. We are limited in our power to externally change things. So we really only have the power, as we go back to free will, to change things internally. And I actually think that in my perspective, that's when we are going to change the most, is when we internally change ourselves, creating a ripple effect. People see you as an example, and they want that. They want that contentment. They don't want to keep going through these highs or in these lows and emotions. They're attracted to you because because you seem like you have wisdom, and then they're intrigued and they ask you, and it just, it's just a ripple effect. And also, if you're not emotionally vomiting on people, then you're also not contributing to that negative ripple effect. So there's like multiple ways we're saving the world by going internal. So that was my aha moment, was realizing that, to me, the internal work is the biggest conspiracy, and nothing, I don't think, can beat it unless we do realize that we're in a simulation and our higher selves are sitting on the other side with VR goggles on, with a Super NES controller, and I mean, that's how I picture us. I don't know if we'll ever get that way and smash the firmament and whatever, but
and they're like, no, I pressed jump, motherfucker.
You're just running into a wall.
That's why it didn't work.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's all super valuable. And I want to add, I hope that, I think we've all said it in various ways, and I hope that it's clear to people that none of your emotions are bad, and you can't stop them.
Yes.
You're going to have them, and you have to accept them. If you don't, they're just going to come back in some bigger, badder, uglier way that's even more difficult. But you also have to be in your process where you're at. And so, and I think one of you said, like, don't judge yourself too harshly, or don't judge yourself at all, and kind of be present with those emotions, because yeah, you're going to have them. And I also think there's something that we try to do sometimes, which is, and this is one of the things, this leads into my next questions of what are some of the biggest frustrations that you guys have had trying to take what you think is the truth in these matters to other people and share them. And one of mine is that I think that people tend to hide their emotional and spiritual truths or experiences to a large extent. And I think it's really difficult to be vulnerable and to show your emotional state as it is. And I mean, there's some aspect of it where maybe you shouldn't share every emotion, and maybe sharing some emotions can have an effect that is undesirable. But I think there's a lot of modeling that can go on in going through an emotional process in a somewhat public way. I deal with this a lot in the classroom, and I think it's traditional to not have emotions in the classroom in front of your students. But I had this teacher when I was in 6th grade, and his daughter died. And instead of, taking a month off or, kind of being absent, he came right back to school the next day and cried in front of us. And I think a lot of people would think that's really irresponsible, but it was a really powerful moment for a lot of us where we realized that we're all humans and that we're all dealing with life, right? And it was really, again, I think a lot of people would really hate that and think this is not cool, it's not appropriate, but I think there's something in that is beautiful and profound, and that maybe if more of us were more open and honest about where we were at and what we were feeling and going through, that maybe that would have an effect on others where they could then acknowledge like, oh, I feel like that too sometimes, or like, oh, this is normal, and have kind of more progress. So
I think
that's one of my biggest frustrations.
That's a great story. And I just wanted to add that I think that that's hiding it impedes the process. And I think about what it must have been like, not only for you guys seeing somebody be that vulnerable in an honest expression of something that just happened that was real. And then it also gifted him an opportunity to be real and not have to take that thing somewhere else over here in polite society, where we have to figure out how to navigate this huge tsunami of emotions that are going on by ourselves or only with a couple of people.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I think the biggest gift we can give anyone is in those, deep dark moments, or, not so deep dark, is to bear witness. Just be there and be human and feel the emotion. Not even having to say anything or acknowledge anything, just being there. And that in itself is a gift that he gave to you, that you are able to see that you're capable of that. A lot of people don't realize that they're capable of it. It doesn't happen unless you're given those moments to be able to bear witness.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing story.
I think that's the testament to vulnerability. It's a powerful agent for growth.
Absolutely.
It's so sad that we just can't that being real isn't accepted nowadays. It's funny to me that we're all born the same way, we all die, and we all poop.
Yeah.
And yet
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, like, why do we have these weird societal constructs where we can't do these things? And I did say when I just spoke that going internal is the most important, but like you're saying, Lindsay, doing these things, showing that you're how to be a real person is very, like, being the example is what we need to be doing. And so whether that's through internal work, showing somebody how you process, or like you're saying, just being vulnerable, where he felt, I mean, I have to think he went to work because that's the most comfortable thing for him to do. I mean, probably not just to avoid it, to just do whatever he does, but I mean, where he probably didn't want to be alone and he had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, so in talking about that, does that make you guys think of any of the kind of frustrations you have had to face trying to bring some of this to other people?
Absolutely. I think just being present and being emotional, just being a human being, a decent human being, sometimes gets your ass kicked. It sucks, because people aren't ready to see that truth. And even if you're not saying it, which sometimes I have to just, I have to remind myself to shut my mouth, because typical Aries fashion, just gonna cut right to it. But I know how to do it in quieter ways too. And sometimes that's still, people really hate it. And I have to remind myself that it's not me, even though, I have the tendency to internalize that it's not me, it's just their programming. And I've broken through the programming, and, they're sensing something. They're sensing there's something different there about me that they're not comfortable with.
It's the Agent Smith phenomenon or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you don't say it, they're like, oh, that girl's different. What's she doing? She's not with the program. Attack her.
Bring it on.
We're watching you.
Yeah, watch me.
What about you, Leela?
I'm actually going to read mine if that's all right.
Yeah.
I got all like in depth with it. So the biggest things I run into with people is unresolved trauma and chronic busyness. We glorify productivity to our own detriment. And what's often missing is our connection with our bodies. Trauma stores in the body, and all of our attempts to medicate, meditate, avoid, indulge, dissociate can prolong the suffering. But if there are no safe, functional alternatives, the above is just doing the best that we can to cope. We are inhabiting these bodies and see and treat them like they are our enemies most of the time. Too fat, too thin, too weak, all of those messages. But when we understand the body is doing every fucking thing that it can to try to protect us, even after decades of the real danger being past, we can start to make peace with it, work with it, and help it to help us heal. This is where I go back to my theory of a dopamine hit with bitching, and I'll also include incessant intellectualizing and dropping down rabbit holes too. Because we now want to talk endlessly about our trauma or what's wrong with the world, but actually doing the work in the body, getting on the mat, being with what comes up, the tears, the laughter is something so few people have the needed support to do. It's scary as fuck, and I get that. And I avoided it for a long time. But I've been lucky enough to find a modality that's helped me experience what it's like on the other side, even if I still have to face resistance within myself to change due to the terror that it can induce. So I wish I could wrap what I know up in a bow and gift it to people, but it doesn't work that way. I can only be present and have my own ducks in a row when someone is really ready.
Nicely said.
That was awesome. Thank you.
That was awesome.
I am definitely guilty of that. Some of that, just not making time to do like what you're talking about. To doing the physical stuff is the hardest part for me. Even exercising. So I'm one of what you mentioned, and I'm here being vulnerable to everybody saying that. My biggest frustrations to me, and this is just my perspective or my perception, is people like hearing this information, but I don't see people, and again, this is just from what I see, I don't really see people making it a priority. And I just said, as I say, I'm a hypocrite now because I just said that I don't give
it's a balance
priority. So essentially I am frustrated with myself, I guess.
Isn't that how it goes though? Like you look at it, the things that are pissing you off are the things that you're like, oh shit, I'm doing
exactly. Everything around you is a mirror of yourself.
Truly.
I didn't. That wasn't planned. By the way,
that was an organic moment. Yeah, I think one of the other frustrations for me is that a lot of us who are doing this work, I think the spiritual and emotional work, have perhaps a tendency to think that we're doing it when we're not. You know, we're like, oh, I know. But then it's like knowing something or even having like learned a lesson or lived it and like thinking you've really got it, like does not mean that you're actually done with that. And I just think it's really easy to stop looking at yourself. And I'm saying this because I do it. Like I'm talking about myself. It's really easy to stop the process at any time. Really easy, too easy to stop. So that's one of the frustrations I have too.
And I'll throw one more out there, but this I mean, this applies to everybody, not people trying to do the work. And necessarily doesn't have to do with the work, but when people say they're sorry for something, I like it's frustrating because a lot of people just say they're sorry because they think that that's what people want to hear. But maybe those listening would consider only saying, or don't say you're sorry when you're sorry, but tell somebody that you learned from this experience, because that means a lot more. And because I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, because if somebody says, I'm sorry, I'm like, are you really sorry? But if somebody comes up to me and says, I'm really, or whatever happened between us, and they say, and I really learned from this experience, and going forward, I'm going to look at it this way, or I'm not going to look at it this way, or I'm going to try to do this. That just means, it means that whatever frustration you had on your end, or whatever you had to go through with that person, their reason was a child of you. And it gives that experience weight versus just somebody saying they're sorry for something that happened.
Yeah.
Because that's actual changed behavior, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. What are you
I've
going
learned to only accept changed behavior as an apology anymore. Words mean nothing.
That's a good point. Yeah, you teach people how to treat you. So if you're letting them treat you a certain way, then that's how they're going to treat you.
Yeah.
Yes, very good.
I like it. So what is it that has given you guys this passion to follow a spiritual or emotional path in life? Like, what is it that you truly love that you're following?
Sometimes I honestly don't know. I think it's just like an internal drive that I don't realize I have. Like, I don't have a choice, right? I do it or I die. I don't know how to be any other way. I honestly don't. But also, I'm coming to a new realization of, sharing these experiences like we are right now, and within our group with people who are at a level, and this is not meant to be condescending, it's just where I'm at in my development, a level where people understand where I'm coming from. That is exciting to me.
Yeah.
And to be able to learn from them in order to better myself. See, it's selfish, of course, but
Yeah.
it always comes back to what can I do for me. But when I want to joke about my ego, but ultimately it's exciting. I mean, I love seeing people just free of their crap, or freeing themselves of their crap. I honestly have been through probably everything you've been through, right? Like, we have those emotional similarities. Like, we vibrate because we understand each other in that way. But I want to see you better. That's where I'm coming from. I want to see every one of you, a better version of yourself. And I don't want to sound like Oprah, but but I mean, like, in a real, hardcore way, not in an Oprah way.
It's like every time you talk, I feel like you're just saying what I was going to say.
Absolutely.
Because I was literally like, this is like the thing that drives me too, is that I want all of humanity to be free and loved and beautiful and perfect. And it is selfish. It's a selfish reason I want that. It's because I like it.
But is it really a selfish thing? Because I feel like it's the way something builds, right? So when you think about a jam session, and this person's playing their guitar and this person's playing their saxophone, and it riffs and it builds and it raises this energy, and that's that thing that kind of comes out that makes us all like, ah.
It's like a rogue wave of love.
Exactly. It's not this like, oh, this thing sucks, and then I'm going to take you down and take you down and take you down and take you down. And that's ego. This is just like, I don't know, it's riding a wave.
Yeah.
That's great.
That is beautiful.
It is.
And back to what, Lindsay was just saying about you're saying what I'm saying. Like, my first thing that I wrote down is, I don't even know. I don't even know, like, but there's something powerful in me that's like this ferocious mother bear. And it's this ongoing tenacity. And there's this alchemy that's been happening recently. Because of the nature of the abuse, my sexual energy was completely corrupted and imbalanced. And I think it was about a year ago, like, it just dawned on me that, like, creative energy is sexual energy and vice versa. So I'm looking at how to bring that passion and that ferocity into everything that I create, whether it's a meal for people or it's a safe space for them to unpack their issues, whatever it is, you know, a garden, it's all that building, that wave, riding that. And, you know, I'm trying to channel it that way. And I still deal with a lot of doubt and confusion in my brain because it's just the monkey mind and those tapes are running. But that keeps me humble because I realize that it is a process and there isn't any finish line.
Beautiful.
And it's hilarious that I also wrote as the first thing, I don't know.
I don't know.
Because I really don't. I thought I was being like all like edgy.
You're the dude to make
awesome.
that t-shirt, right?
Yeah. Well, that's like really interesting too, because I was just thinking about how our culture is very incapable, I think, of saying I don't know. And you guys said it to like one of these like really profound questions. So it's really cool.
Yeah. The only thing I can point to is I've always felt like I was going to meet somebody at some point and I was going to help them share something. And I would like have these daydreams that, you know, how like you read an autobiography. Wow. I don't know.
We know what you're saying.
I think it's, you read a biography of somebody and they talk about how this person taught with this person or learned under this person. I'm always fascinated to think, wow, this person actually lived the same time this great person lived and they interacted, and this person actually saw this person go to the bathroom. And I'm not obsessed with poop, but I'm just like, that's where my mind goes. Like, this person saw this person be human, even though we idolize this person, you know, to an extent where we think that they're not human, like Einstein or somebody like a great mind. And I was always drawn to thinking about that, and that I would somehow meet somebody and help them carry out whatever it is that they're doing. And then I'm not saying I'm going to be in a biography or autobiography, but
it's a matter of time.
I guess that was just my connection to that.
Excellent. So then, could there be anything that you think transforms you guys into someone who doesn't pursue this path and leaves it behind?
That was my I don't know question. I don't ever see that happening, so I don't know. I think if I were like seriously, even if I were seriously injured and in like the worst pain, that would only catapult me into, you know, a different level of dealing with stuff, because that's how I'm built. Just, you know, those really tough, I can't think of the word, catastrophic, you know, situations really springboard me into just internal development. And so yeah.
I was a pretty hard no until I thought deeper, and I recently did a sort of, I don't know what I'm calling it, like some sort of an intention image, sort of like magic thing that I'm doing for myself. And the intention was that my novel would take off and get big. And like one of my first friends that ever read it said, like, this is going to be a movie and you're going to have merchandise and it's going to get huge. And I was just like, yes, like that would be so awesome. Not because I want to be rich and famous, but because I love the book so much. But I do a tarot reading when I do my intentions. And so my tarot reading warned me that, you know, if this does happen and there's a path where it can, the danger in that is that this spiritual path becomes a lot harder to keep. And Claude just kind of nailed it. He said for him, it would be like if he won the lottery, followed by hardcore hedonism might take him off the path. And it's like kind of a similar thing. I think that might be like the challenge of the spiritual path for anyone who is incredibly rich, is that it's probably very difficult to stay in touch.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wrote. I wrote that if I did, it would be self-inflicted. It would be a choice that I've made
Right.
maybe not one that I consciously chose, but it would be my responsibility and my fault that I've done. And I just wrote, I could only see it if there was like a major trauma or distraction, which could be death, winning the lottery, or fame. I hope wouldn't happen, but
Yeah, I hope so too.
I felt like I would have periods of time with it, like I have in the past, where exhaustion or like constant cosmic 2x4s to the head, get in the way. So I have to usually experience like a breakdown or some kind of tragedy or, being on my knees in the dark night of the soul or whatever, like to break through it, and want to give up. But there's so many more functional ways that are unfolding and learning and listening and processing. And then Kara touched on it earlier when I was thinking about what I came up against in those moments. I've watched some friends of mine who've given up functionally, where they're just like, fuck it, universe, like I'm done. I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this. None of it's working. I don't know if it's ego driven or what, but I'm just gonna chop wood and carry water until something else opens up. And then being receptive to that when it actually shows. And sometimes it takes a long time, and you're just like freaking out about, am I too lazy? Am I missing it? Like, but just being patient with how long it takes for something beautiful to come to fruition. It's not instantaneous.
Well said. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to skip ahead like 2 questions.
Okay.
All right. So, because I think we kind of have hit on some of these. And so I wanted to get to what you guys think are the ways which society gets things wrong in the realm of emotions.
Mine was kind of quick and to the point. I just said overexpression or over repression. It just throws us off kilter from being present in the moment. It lets us be carried away with emotion instead of listening to what emotion has to tell us as kind of not even necessarily a warning signal, but just like ping, like, look at this.
Mhm. Emotions are meant to inform, our inner gnosis. That's all. But it's important. My answer was, shutting up those emotions or bypassing with distraction.
Or a pill.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm never going to judge someone for using medication to get through what they need to get through. And at the same time, I'm always going to promote every other method instead of that.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that you have to feel those emotions. And I know that there's chemical imbalances, and I believe that they're for a reason. And I believe that you actually have to experience and go through it in order to come out the other side.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I have been diagnosed with depression-related anxiety-related depression, ADD, ADHD, and PTSD. So I say that as someone who's been overly medicated.
Yeah.
Not just from a random place of guesswork. Do you want to add anything, Aaron, to what society gets wrong with emotions?
yeah, because I missed the question because I had to break up a cat fight. But
you got to deal with some emotions while we were talking about these emotions.
Yeah, they're all up on my desk and like battling each other.
You're like, pay attention to me.
Distractions.
How society gets emotions wrong?
Yeah.
Making people think. I guess, that's the best way. It's not the way I want to say it, but making people think that emotions are given to you and don't come from you.
Mm-hmm.
So are not your responsibility, but they're somehow like projected onto you, and you're making me feel this way. You're making me emote this way. It's really you deciding to emote, and I know that sounds rough. Like, I'm not physically being like, should I cry right now or not? And then hitting yes and then crying. But through our associations and our past traumas that the person in front of you, whatever they're doing or saying, is triggering a trauma, most likely that happened in your past in association. So if somebody in front of you is like bullying you, it may remind you of like your big brother when you were little being bullied. And so that same response that you had back then is coming up here. And so, yeah, but I don't want to get too far ahead, but just realizing that that is a role this person's playing for you to identify that what you're feeling is something from way back when helps you to define that your emotions are you. And like, I think Kara maybe said it, or maybe we all said it, that your emotions are just kind of your like signals telling you something's wrong or something's going off or whatever. So that just helps you to remember that they're from you, they're your responsibility and not somebody else's. Somebody can't make you emote.
Yeah. And another way to look at that is that nobody does anything for any other reason than what's inside of them. So the way someone's behaving and treating you has nothing to do with you, literally, every time. And it seems like an impossibility, but I believe it's the truth, just like what you're saying. I think I'm saying what you're saying. So then what are the ways in which society gets mental illness wrong?
I think that it's that mental illness is both a manufactured disease and also a label, which is a misnomer. So it's super confusing to people who, either have never had to deal with it, don't deal with it, choose not to deal with it, or are just, completely clueless for whatever reason. And it's made to be that way. That's on purpose. I strongly believe that.
You think it's an intentional deception?
Absolutely.
It serves a purpose.
Yep. Serves an agenda.
Well, I'll just say what my idea, again, I think it's a little bit radical and I don't mean to judge anyone or tell people what they should do. I'm going to say none of us here are medical professionals and none of us are acting as your medical professional. And if you're experiencing anything, you should find professional help for that. And I also come from a place where I believe, based on many different types of experiences and explorations, that mental illness is never... what should I say? It's not actually about, it's not about your emotions. You're not broken. Oftentimes it can be due, in my opinion, to entities that are around you. And it doesn't matter to me like how you view those entities. You can look at it as a metaphor for some imbalance in your own life, and you call that an entity, or you can look at it as an actual entity that has its own mind and its own will. But I think that in either way you look at it, it can be entities are manipulating you to see or believe certain things about yourself in order to feed off the really strong emotional energy that comes out of you when you believe those things. And that can be one type of mental illness, more like depression and anxiety and things like that. I think it can stem from imbalances you have, and then it can lead to a situation where there's like a parasitic energy sucking going on. So this is where I get a little bit radical and paranormal for some people. But I also think that schizophrenia in particular and other delusions that are labeled delusional aren't actually delusions at all, and that people with schizophrenia or other delusional experiences are actually tapping into real events and real entities and real things going on that other people can't necessarily tap into or are choosing not to tap into. And I think this has been, to me, it's been proven so many times. And there was maybe Sasha can remind me, there was someone on Freeman Fly's show not that long ago, and he was working in psychiatric hospitals, and he would experience things where people with schizophrenia would tell him things that they shouldn't be able to know. Like they'd be able to kind of like map areas they had never been in and know which objects they could find there or read information from other people's minds. And so he kind of developed that same theory on his own. But I think it also connects back to people who can experience that, what we would often call delusions, and navigate it can bring back powerful learnings for themselves or their tribe or other people. And they can also go into that realm in order to find information or knowledge. And so I think sometimes people like that have been called shamans in the past or other names for other societies. And I think now we really get it wrong by labeling those people as insane and labeling what they're experiencing as not real, and then treating it like it's something to be medicated away. And those medications often ruin people's lives, where these people could be helped in such a way or embraced maybe in such a way that they could be truly powerful kind of spiritual warriors for themselves and everyone around them. But that's my radical hippie view of mental illness. Maybe it's beyond hippie.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No,
I just
no,
want to add something. And we've talked about this between at least the both of us, that I worked, and I've worked with, different levels of mental health and behavioral health for years, but I worked with severely, what is termed in our society as severely mentally ill population when I lived in Tucson. And there were people there, and it was like a group home setting, right? So it's not institutionalized per se. They were still on a schedule, taking medication, whatever. But it was in a more like the staff to client ratio was less, right? So we got more time with to spend with the individuals there being served. And it was my first interaction with people with schizophrenia, but it was obviously severe enough to where they needed to be placed in a home because they couldn't function in society normally, right? Like, what does that mean to me now that I know what normal is as far as mental health and mental illness goes? And I roll my eyes at those terms sometimes because I'm still trying to figure out what is and isn't, real or true. But so what I want to say is that I would have experiences where, they tell me so and so is sitting right next to me in that chair, right next to you. And at the time, I was, totally open to spirits, ghosts. I didn't know about archonic entities or energy at that point. But, being empathic and feeling energy, I knew that they weren't lying. And so that experience right there for me was extremely powerful to see with my own eyes. Something is going on, and it's something that not everybody gets to see. And I just saw it. So what does that mean to me?
You had that external confirmation.
Exactly. And, I still go back to that. And I mean, it just breaks my heart that we have to, have people live in this way that are extremely functional in their own way. But they can't function in this society.
Normal society.
Exactly.
Well, and how could you if you're seeing these things and hearing these things that no one else, not only does no one else see them, but no one will let you see them,
Well, they're not valued. Mm-hmm. It's, not only is it, that doesn't exist, it's, that's terrible. You don't want to be talking about that, even though the paradigm or the atmosphere of the treatment facility that I worked in is very personal, and a lot of the people there identified personally, with people because they'd been through their own shit. So that's where my story comes in. So it was good to see other people acknowledging that we understand that you have a certain thing that we don't, but we know it's there. But you also are in this really shitty situation where you have to be forced to take drugs or go to jail, So it's yeah.
And I want to get to everyone. So sorry, Leela, for cutting you off. I know you're about to say something really cool, but Sasha told me that Jerry Marzinski is the name of the guy who was on Freeman Fly. And I also want to point out that there's therapists everywhere that are starting to, instead of treating delusions like they're delusions, they're starting to treat them like they're real, and that is more effective than any other treatment method. So that also tells you something about, well, that could give you evidence if you're trying to decide what you think about it. But I also want to throw in here is Jeff is asking in the group, how would a person get rid of said parasitic intelligences? So if that view is real and there are parasites that feed off of us, how would we get rid of them? So maybe, Leela, you can say what you're going to say, and then I think you could probably also offer some insight on how to get rid of something like that.
Sure. Well, I was thinking about the assumption that the system itself isn't parasitic or pathological to varying degrees. And even just recently, one of the things that I've noticed is we've gone from having mental health, not necessarily like healthy mental health being funded, to it being corporatized. So people aren't getting the health care that they need, even when it wasn't great before. So I see a couple of things going on. I see a movement of peer-to-peer support happening, actual like houses and therapy sessions where people who have been through things that are similar to you, they're there. And sometimes there are rooms that you can stay in if you're having like an actual breakdown instead of going into a psychiatric facility. But there's counseling, and there's group activities, and sometimes it's just like, hey, let's get together and like eat some pizza and hang out with each other instead of, here's 15 minutes with this dude that you don't even know if he's got his own mental health he's going to give you some pills that he doesn't really know what the side effects are, and good luck with that. And then, not to mention, like, if they aren't working for you, there really isn't much in place to help you get off of them, and they're totally addicting, and they alter you on really deep levels, and if you go cold turkey on it, talking about major problems. And then I think individual people, I wanted to share this story of a friend of mine who was a therapist, and she worked with somebody with schizophrenia, and they had eyes watching them all the time. And the pictures that they drew were similar to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alex Gray, but he always has those like eyes kind of watching over. And they were terrified, and it was constantly seen as a pathology. It was constantly trying to be medicated and controlled. And this therapist was just like, okay, so tell me about them. Do they feel sinister? Do they ever want to hurt you? Do they ever? And the person was like, no, no, no. And they're like, well, maybe they're watching out for you. Maybe it's something benevolent. Maybe you've got like a legion at your back that's got you covered. And this person's life just completely changed with this reframe.
Wow.
Right? So that goes into the next thing about like, how do you clear a parasite? Well, hopefully you'll meet somebody that's done their own. And then if not, like, just becoming aware of it is just like, well, how do we get rid of any kind of parasite? We cleanse.
Yeah.
And there are different ways to do that. And some of it is physical. Sometimes you really need to get your gut health in order, and because that stuff's influencing you, like everything in there's like, oh my God, give me sugar, oh my God, give me wheat, give me this, like the very thing that you shouldn't have. People that are allergic to cheese want nothing but cheese in their face. So part of it is just like understanding how the parasite works, and then there's plenty of, some of it's woo-woo and some of it's not, like ways online that you can look up, like, what does it look like? And for me, it was like recognizing that there are all these cords that were tied to me. And sometimes I would delve in and be like, oh, well, it's connected to this and this is why and yada, yada. But eventually it got to the point where it's just like, okay, whoosh, I don't know why it's connected. If I need to figure it out, I'll delve more into it. But most of the time it's just like, whoosh, you don't have my permission. You don't get the free ride. You don't get to, psychic vampire me today. Sage, stones, casting a circle, like whatever it is that makes you feel safe and comfortable or works with your particular spiritual ideology. There are lots of ways.
And I like that, I don't think that it's like any one of those ways is the best way or the good way. I think what it really comes down to is that your belief in what is going to work is what is going to work. So it's like the ultimate placebo effect. So if you believe that sage is going to work, it's going to work. And so when it really comes down to it, it's your mind or your heart or however you want to describe that that's doing that work. But you're placing your belief in it, you're imagining it, you're visualizing it, and then you're taking action to accomplish it. And that is what is working. And I think maybe like Rupert Sheldrake has the idea of morphic resonance. So if we've been using sage for thousands of years to accomplish this task, it's probably going to be more powerful than if we burn grass or whatever.
Right.
So there probably is something to that, but I just think you can probably use any ceremony you want to get rid of an entity as long as you believe that there's some value in it. So
I can I can throw mine out there very quickly.
Yeah.
Society gets mental illness wrong through thinking anyone outside of what's considered their normal is considered sick. And I mean, from my perception, we're all a variation of mentally ill, right? I mean, what they consider mentally ill. So if we're all mentally ill, then are we not all mentally ill?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's all just, I agree with Kara. It's just a label to me anyway. And that's just through my perception and my experience. I agree with everything said, that in most cases, I think there's something else going on and that the label is just being used to suppress whatever it is.
Yeah, and to control and disempower, right? Every way that they can do that makes their life easier. Whether we're talking about entities or physical beings or both. All right, so what are some of the ways that society gets it wrong in the realm of spirituality then?
I wrote, some think that their religion or lack of religion is superior to an authentic spiritual life. Of course, we can use these things as guides to take ourselves deeper, but more often than not, they're ritualistic distractions from the vastness of all.
Yeah.
I said something very similar, but I think it's in society, its spirituality is way too overcomplicated with words, symbols, rituals, and it's all very well and good to want to know and to understand what that means, to research that if that interests you, but it's absolutely not required to have a spiritual experience or to be a spiritual being. We are spiritual beings.
Nice.
That's it.
And I took it a little different way. When I thought spiritual, I thought of mainstream spiritual. So how society gets spiritualism wrong is, I think it's promoted as being mostly conceptual. A lot of the things are all concepts that people think about, like, oh, we're all going to ascend, we're all going to go into, the seventh dimension together, but nobody's doing the work. So how are we going to get there? Because as soon as you start to, get angry, you're immediately dropping down and you're no longer enlightened because you're allowing this emotion to take you from your higher vibration down to the lower vibration. So that is another thing that frustrates me, is that that everything's conceptual and nobody's actually looking at digging deeper.
Yeah, and the kind of trend amongst all of that you guys just said is that like it's spirituality is way more internal and way less of this external trapping and specified kind of path and follow the steps and do the ritual, and it's way more of this internal work that you have to do. You don't have to do anything, but that you could do.
Yeah, I think I think it was Kara who said a while back that just knowing, like, you don't need religion to tell you how to, like, true spirituality is what we find inside of us. And I mean, I forget where I was going, but I resonated fully with that. Like, we didn't need an external source to tell us what spirituality is. So maybe that is true spirituality, is finding it inside yourself and not needing somebody, to direct you.
And didn't all the greats say that? Like Jesus said, I am the way. He didn't say, follow me,
Yes.
and do, I don't know. He is the way. You got to do the thing. I think they all said that in some way or another. So, what is inside of us? Oh, sorry. What are some major trends in society that lead us away from mental, emotional, and spiritual health, or lead us into disease? In
Pretty
your
much
guys' opinion.
anything that can distract you from doing the inner work. I think it's okay to, be aware of what's going on and have it inform you. We don't have to cut ourselves off completely, but I mean, there's way too many things to list.
Yeah, I agree.
Entertainment, distraction, avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's all kind of the same thing to me.
Yeah, specifically in entertainment, the way relationships and communication is portrayed as like the normal or everyday relationship on all these sitcoms, how they interact. I mean, we watch that, and that's like how we're learning how to relate to one another, that and our parents. And if neither one get it, then we're fucked.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like that. And the lower end of exaggerated male and female stereotypes. So like the male has to be macho and not have emotions, and the woman has to be very feminine and squeaky and not speak up, and like those types of roles. And then the idea that nothing is your fault, when realistically, essentially everything's your fault. Everything that you encounter is your responsibility.
Oh, and aren't we in like the crux of that right now as a society, of believing that nothing is our fault? We have no responsibility. Yes. It's all being done to us. We're the ultimate victims right now. I literally heard someone say that since Trump was elected, no one has asked them what their personal pronoun is. And I'm like, dude, no offense, but probably no one asked you what your personal pronoun was ever. Like, until recently, we weren't having this conversation. So I don't know. Anyway, sorry. That was a bit of an offbeat comment. But I think, too, one of the main things that I wanted to get to in this is that our society really promotes disconnection in all the ways that you guys just mentioned are a form of that, right? Disconnection from source, disconnection from yourself, disconnection from others, disconnection from the earth. And I think that creates disease.
Yes. Yeah, the earth one, totally perfect.
I mean, that's one of our greatest resources, right? Is that we can connect to the earth. I'm such a hippie.
With the entertainment, as a distraction and an avoidance mechanism, it's not just mainstream shit. Like, I'll find myself being like, oh, this, it's not even just ancient aliens. Like, oh, it's conspiracy, conspiratainment. But even deeper, like, how many podcasts am I listening to and not paying attention to my own, life? How, not that I do that, but sometimes I get into that rut or habit, and I have to realize that, oh, well, that's the same thing. It's the same energy of watching Friends or, some completely unrealistic mainstream idea of relationships.
That's that thing where like anything can be a trap, right? Like, I do it as a teacher too. So I'll be like teaching and like really connecting with my students, and I'll be like, yeah, this is so great. We're all doing this deep work. And then all of a sudden I get in this habit and then like a month has gone by before I'm like, oh my God, I haven't really connected with any of my students in that whole, like, what happened? And you get caught up in this idea like, well, because I'm here doing this, it is good. It's like, no, you have to keep connecting over and over again for something to remain good.
Exactly. You have to be mindful of it. You actually have to you have to be connected. Yeah.
And the off routes to the path are many.
Yes.
That's an excellent point, Kara, and I thank you for sharing that. Because as many know, or a few know, that I've used this group like our THC group, and now the new group, I've used it to further my my spiritual growth just by interacting with everybody and practicing. So yes, some could use it as just a distraction, but when you're aware of why you're using it, or maybe even like 50-50, because I can't say that I just used it for that, but I was aware. There was a point, and this is probably an answer to one of the other questions, but there was a point when I was a moderator, and I had a run-in with Greg Boycott, and we were disagreeing about something stupid. And,
what's up, Greg?
Yeah, what up, Greg, if you're even doing this anymore. I think it was even about flat Earth or something, and which is funny because he's no longer a global Earthist. But we had a disagreement, and I was just kind of like egging him on by putting gifts down and just doing a gift train, and like I knew he seemed like he was in the state of like not very happy, and I just kept doing it, so it kept further his reactions getting angrier and angrier, and I wasn't really angry, but I was just like kind of egging him on. And then I left I left for a while. I thought about it. I'm like, what am I doing? First of all, I'm a moderator, and I need to be an example of what I'm talking about. I can't be doing this, and even though like that's his, I know like essentially that's his shit he's dealing with. I'm just playing a role. I need to not be playing those roles. So I went back to him. I apologized, and just by that act of apologizing, it like released. As Leela talked about the cords, it like cut the cords, and I felt like we were like bros now, because we had that moment of vulnerability where we just recognize each other as humans. Nice. And it was just a really cool situation and experience, because I never viewed him like that again as just like another personality. I viewed him as like a human.
A real person. That's what I mean, a lot of people who are listening to this eventually might not have any idea what we're talking about, but I really love this group for that reason, because I feel like a lot of people have come to vulnerable places with each other, and that's real growth. Like, it doesn't matter that most of us have never met in real life. You can still have this real experience of growth with each other. And I see it all the time in that group, and I love it. Like, there's people who will start to fight and get kind of angry and maybe even like call each other names, which is usually the end. Then you're like, well, fuck you, and you walk away or whatever, or you say fuck you and get even meaner. But then at the end have been like, no, man, I love you. And I'm just like, damn, like that just happened. That doesn't even happen on the internet. It doesn't even happen in real life, but especially not on the internet.
Exactly.
It's been really amazing. And I think like whether you are aware of it or not, for some reason, this group is full of enough aware individuals that a lot of people, I think, have gotten a lot of growth out of it. And it's been truly incredible to watch. I love it. I don't mean to watch, like I've been a part of it too. I've been growing also and learning. So
and facilitating. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I think we all kind of are facilitating. I like to think that. I think it's true. So, so then we're kind of moving on to what we can do to sort of protect against some of these trends in society that might lead to spiritual, mental, or emotional disease. So what is it inside of us or that we're capable of that can offer us protection or health, especially when we have been harmed or acquired some of these mental, spiritual, or emotional diseases?
I think it's important to remember that we're basically the vastness of the universe.
Nice.
That's usually too much for people to grasp. So, I was thinking about smaller steps of self-awareness, love, acceptance. And I had an aha moment during the early stages of my somatic practice when I recognized just how brutal I was to myself. This inner dialogue and my actions. And the thought occurred to me that I would never talk to another child or another person in the same way that I talk to myself. And I got really curious about that. And the amazing thing was that once I was able to bring awareness, changed behavior, like we talked about before, and general remorse and care to that part of myself, it was an instant release. Like there was a spirit of forgiveness, understanding, and an opportunity for me to start to repair and develop the trust that I had lost in myself, just trying to survive. So it was really humbling to feel. It was almost like this part of me, it was just like waiting for me, like just thank you for finally, like I've been waiting for you to like get here to see it, to
It's that
embrace it.
controller was pressing jump and you finally jumped. It's like,
Mhm.
yes.
Yep.
What do you think, Aaron or Kara?
I'm just reviewing.
Getting clear on who you are and what your intentions or values are. To me, and whether that's utilizing the human design and destiny cards or astrology or any of those types of systems, just to get clarification on what is you, like, because this has helped me realize what is me and what I don't need to shun, but actually work with. Because when you realize what parts of you are molded energetically from the time you're born, and how your life is, what you're supposed to be good at, or how the divine divided up all your attribute points, then like what you're built for, what your strengths are, and what your mini strengths are. And when you know that, then you know kind of what you need to work on, or what your strength is. And so if you want to work with a group and everybody utilize their strengths, then you know what yours are. And maybe people out there don't, maybe they think they know what theirs are, but they haven't checked their energetic makeup. And I just know for me that there were parts of me that people, or maybe society, shunned. And it wasn't until I got affirmation by looking at these things that I was like, man, this really is me. And I don't know if pride is something good, but I have like I felt good about who I am. I definitely resonate with my energetic makeup, and I know some people don't. I don't know why that is, but I definitely do. And I don't know what that means, but it makes me love myself more because I fully love who I am and who I'm supposed to be energetically. That makes sense. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
But
Perfect sense.
I think it makes perfect sense too. Like, first know yourself and also love yourself.
Mhm.
Which like is a lot harder than it sounds. And so one of the pathways to that is what you're describing, which is a really beautiful tool. And maybe you can tell people where they can find that, unless you want to do that later.
I can do it later. I'll do it at the end. So
Okay.
if anybody is like thinking about it, I'll just throw it at the end, and we can just put it all in one area so people can know where to find it. But yeah, I can visualize people just being so confused with who they are and not knowing like what their place is in the world. And when there are these systems out there that are a guide, and it's not going to tell you how to do things, but it's just like a weather report, personal weather report for your life. I'm talking about like the day-to-day or astrological, projections of your year and things like that. They just help so much. So you don't have to be out there alone in the dark. There are tools that can help you.
I love it.
Yeah. I think I answered this when I saw the question. I was like, yeah, like that's an awesome question. It's inside all of us. It really is. No one is more special than anyone else in this, or in general, but in this regard as well too. I mean, we have the option to choose to cultivate awareness and a practice. And like we were talking earlier about the distractions, those are obviously a quick road to imbalance and instability, mental and emotional, which obviously, kind of divides and makes the spiritual really hard to get to. So just cultivating an awareness practice, I make that sound like really simple, and it can be, and it totally can be. But if you've never done it before, I've talked to people who are like, well, how do I do that? I'm like, just sit down and just meditate. Like, right? Like that's not easy for somebody who's never done it before. I was totally there at one point. So I try to remember with some of the Buddhist practices that I remember from my beginnings in meditation and yoga practice, beginner's mind. So go back to just keep going back to the beginning. Go back to where you remember starting. Or if you've never started, just say, okay, this is where I'm starting. You make it the beginning. You make it yours. And ask yourself, what am I doing to strengthen this practice? Am I allowing myself to be distracted? Okay, well, what am I doing about that? How is that happening? Is it necessary? Like maybe sometimes I need to be distracted in a little bit. Like, Leela's bitch sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've totally done that together and have agreed, wow, that was really effective. Now let's not do that again for a while.
Yeah.
So, in moderation, everything can be okay. So ask yourself those questions, and just let whatever emotions and questions arise, just let them be. Don't think too hard about it. If you do, don't shame yourself. And it's really more simple than it needs to be, but in the beginning, it's frustrating and really fucking hard. I will admit that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we all, we've all been there, but remembering that we've been there is the most important thing for us to be aware of others who are in that situation.
I love describing all these tools that people can use to heal and to take care of themselves and their mental, spiritual, and emotional health. And I like that you pointed that out. And Leela said, let's have the Bish sessions. And you said some of these things too. And it's like that concept that all of these things can be, we've mentioned that these things can be distractions, but then they can also be helpful in some ways. And there's this part in The Way of this Peaceful Warrior. Am I saying that right? Yeah, that book where he's kind of like, wait, what the fuck? His guru guy or whatever, I don't remember the story exactly, but his guru guy or whatever is like smoking a cigarette and drinking. And he's like, I thought we're not supposed to smoke and drink. And the dude's like, until you do, like everything in moderation. And so it is like that beginner's mind too, where like you don't know everything and there is no like hard answer of what is and isn't anything, I guess. I don't know how helpful or unhelpful that was, but just to like not be too harsh or judgmental about anything, I guess. Yeah. Not to decide in absolutes, maybe. But what other types of things would you guys mention for people to take better care of themselves emotionally, spiritually, and mentally?
My experience has been that you have to include the physical in that. So somatic work was primary for me because I would try to sit down and meditate or try to sit down and like get back to beginner's mind, and everything in my nervous system was just completely freaked out. So I'm going to read this real fast. So helping the nervous system to achieve a ventral vagal state such as safety, groundedness, curiosity, and love increases digestion, resistance to infection, encourages rest and recuperation, circulation, and oxytocin production. These states can allow us to experience immobility without fear. And I always pause when I hear those words because immobility without fear was such a foreign concept to me.
Wow.
So TRE and somatic experiencing are two of the primary modalities that I know about. TRE is trauma release exercise or tension and stress release exercise. Some people have success with EMDR or tapping, anything that you can do to kind of get the body and the brain to start communicating with each other in a new way that isn't just this continuing cycle. So maybe you have a mindfulness practice and everything's going along swimmingly, and then all of a sudden your reptilian brain gets hit and none of this stuff works for you because that part of your brain is offline now. So doing these somatic practices helps you clear up, not necessarily makes it go away, but it lessens the amount of times that you get hijacked like that, where the triggers just take you down. So you have a better chance of integrating these other practices, whether they're physical practices, mental practices, spiritual, emotional practices, into your life. And of
Yeah.
course, that opens you up to things like, good sleep, clean water, good diet, hanging out with people that aren't assholes, not being an
Yeah.
asshole yourself.
Cleaning up your environment. I love
Mhm.
that you bring that up though, because we can list all of these things that we want to, like what you just listed, like drink water and eat healthy and exercise, all those things. But if you're not capable of, I don't want to say control necessarily, but kind of controlling your own emotional state, which you can't do if you're traumatized and triggered,
Yeah.
then you can't do any of those effectively. And Leela, you're actually the one that taught me that meditation can be harmful for someone who has been traumatized.
Yeah.
Which I did not know. And I don't think many people do, or maybe I was just the dumb one. I don't know, but it
No, I
just
think
blew
it's
my
very
mind.
common. I've had a lot of people argue with me about that. But when you think about a traumatized state, when we get into the higher levels of trauma, we're talking about a freeze state, a dissociated state. So you're sitting there on your Zafu and you think you're in the zone, but really you're just out of your body, like you have been every other time that you've been triggered. So somebody that actually has a regulated nervous system, when they meditate, they're in there and they're out there and they're, like all these processes are happening at the same time and they get these great benefits from it. But somebody that sits on that mat that can't do that, this becomes another thing to beat themselves up with, because it's just like, I don't feel better after I do this. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And then you just keep trying harder and harder and harder, or you just give up.
Yeah. It's really crucial for people to know. So what do you think, Erin? What types of things would you recommend people do? We kind of mashed together these two things, like either on this kind of just lower level of general good health, or whether it's like the deeper healing that people need.
Sure. For lower level stuff, I took that as wanting to deflect taking on any more emotional stuffing or trauma or anything like that. So you're kind of like just not allowing new stuff to come in. And so, of course, I put listen to wise. I think
It's
that's
true. It's
Give
basically
good.
that plug.
altering your perspective so that you can gain knowledge. I mean, everything basically we're talking about here is talked about in that podcast. So it's just, I guess, in more practical sense on tools you can use on a daily basis. And some things that are talked about: take responsibility for your actions and emotions, and practice acceptance. And acceptance is important to note that it doesn't mean you are condoning. So when I say acceptance, we can accept that the world is the way it is, that there are horrible things that go on in the world. I can accept that. Now, if I want to step into duality and fight that and be like, no, there's so many horrible things, I can't take it anymore, then I'm just taking on all this emotion that I'm creating by having friction with these things that I know go on, but I'm resisting it and trying to wish it away and say that it doesn't happen. Or from a wellness standpoint, I can just accept that these things happen and not take on that emotion or fight it, but just accept it. That doesn't mean that I, like that these things are happening. I'm just saying that in this realm, my perspective on this realm is that these things are going to happen. This is why we're here, to experience good and bad things. So in my perspective, I don't think that our realm would ever be all good. I think we would have to go to a new sandbox or whatever that is, a new terrarium where that next level is. But in here, we're just experiencing polarity, and that's I mean, so you can choose to fight it and just take on all this unnecessary emotion, or you can be at ease with it. So that's a big thing that is taking me a year to really wrap my head around, and I just love that perspective. And I know people are going to fight it because there are some topics that people don't like to talk about and they don't want to exist, but it does, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can try to find those people doing those things and kill them all, but it's either going to pop up somewhere, or that energy is probably going to move somewhere else into another unspeakable event. So you're never going to cure the world of hate or evil or anything like that, in my perspective. Now, somebody may think differently, and that's fine. I'm open for a discussion on that. But anyway, just going that. So that was kind of my lower level stuff. That helps me protect myself from taking on more emotion. But on a deeper level, just knowing that when you emote, it's never about that person. It's usually tied to another emotion from another childhood. So that helps you then when you respond to somebody, it's not about that person. That person's playing a role to bring up something in your past, like I talked about before. And that's really useful for healing your past emotions by tapping into that emotion and maybe going into writing a letter to that person who hurt you or to your inner self, and just bringing that emotion back up, writing about how it makes you feel, crying, just kind of going through the process of removing that emotion because you have never looked at that in a healing way. And then, of course, there are many activities to help remove stored trauma. Of course, TRE, I had the great experience with Leah of meeting Leela in person and going through a TRE class, which was really cool and really scary because I was, I don't want to say it again because that'll be the third time that I bring it up, but I was scared that I was going to have bodily functions that would just happen while I was shaking and I wouldn't be able to control it.
And some of these bodily functions are like to be expected, right? During that process. Yeah.
Yep.
I would also be scared of that. I mean, that's like you said, it's one of the stupid things as humans that we all know that we all do, but you're not allowed to do it.
But I mean, it was a really cool experience, and I'm ashamed that I have not done it on my own yet. And again, that's why I brought up that I'm bad at prioritizing physical things like exercise and doing the TRE, but also some things. I think yoga is a great tool for helping to move that stored trauma or energy, but also for a type of meditation. If you can really get into it and quiet the monkey mind while you're doing it, it's a great tool. And of course, sound baths or Alexander's sound table is a cool tool where it vibrates low level energy, waves through your body to help break up the energy. But even like if you go to a gong, like somebody's doing gongs or bowls, just anything that creates dissonance that can help move that energy in you. Breath work and of course meditation, and I like to throw in meditation with intentions or visualizations.
I want to mention some things that some people in the chat are bringing up because Sasha pointed out that writing is what works for her, and I had mentioned my counselors had me do that. That's very helpful for me too. In fact, I always say like my novel that I brought up and everything else I've ever written, I basically write for myself, and it just is cool that other people tend to like some of them because I really don't ever write something with the aims of anyone else ever reading it. But Johnny Votto said that he makes himself cry sometimes, and it's interesting. I think we have this propensity. It's another sickness in our society that we like tell people not to cry. Or when I was a kid, it was like, oh, I'll give you something to cry about, you know, and these really repressive pushback against crying. But crying actually literally lets out what toxin is that? Some toxin that's in your body that you create when you're stressed out. So crying is actually helping you get rid of that emotion.
Adrenaline, cortisol release.
So so crying is actually really good for you. I mean, you can cry too much too, and for unhealthy reasons, and perhaps that's not good.
I think there are two levels of crying. There's one where you're feeling sorry and pity for yourself, and that's not healing. That's, I mean, that is a stage of grief and whatever. I'm not judging that, but I think, like, you know, I lost one of my dear cats almost a year ago, and I mean, I cried for like a week, and of course I went through the emotions of crying for pity, crying for sadness for her, for what happened, for me not being there, for feeling guilty, and then you get to a point where you just have emotion and you just need to cry, and it's not tied to really any emotion. But I know Alexander mentions that when you're at this point, you want to cry, but replace those thoughts with what life lessons, you know, this cat brought me. I learned so much patience because she was feral, and you know, I don't know if I trained her or she trained me, but we eventually, you know, got on the same page and we were best buds. So you know, replacing those negative or not so helpful emotions with the helpful or different perspective of what did I learn from this? This cat was my teacher, in a way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I feel like that's similar to what Leela was talking about earlier with the reframing, right? You're like reframing something that seemed negative into something more positive. And I love that
Absolutely.
practice and that idea. And I just would put out the warning that it can be another type of trap to use reframing as a way to avoid.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? And I think that's like a tricky one to even talk about, but I guess it's just another one of those things you always want to think about, like, what am I actually feeling? What do I actually need? Which is harder than it sounds. So we're going into like the downslope here. And I wanted us to all reflect on, like, who are you today because of what you've learned along the way to mental, emotional, and spiritual health?
Anyone?
Well, I'll just say that I'm really fucking proud of myself.
Yeah.
And
Woohoo!
not in a way that I'm better than anyone else. This is my own journey, nobody else's.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being myself. I love being alone with myself. I love being with other people with myself. I think I'm pretty goddamn cool.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's a long time coming. I'm still young, apparently. um, and I've got a long way to go, but I'm who I'm supposed to be.
I love who you're supposed to be.
Thank you.
Me too. I am. I'll throw mine out there. I came from a place where when I was 12, I said and I believed that love did not exist. And I think that everyone who knows me now, even superficially, could tell that that is not where I'm at now. And I kind of like spew love at everything that I find. It's my superpower.
Gosh.
So I am completely who I am today because of spiritual, emotional, and mental health that I have, that has been long fought and hard won, but it is literally everything. It's the only reason that I'm alive.
Well, I am me because I don't know who I am. I mean, I know who I am, but I don't know how to explain to other people. I resonate. I just feel like I'm supposed to be here. I don't know how to explain that. It's not. I like to say it was a choice, but I don't think it was a choice. And this is not coming from ego, but hopefully I am an example to those looking to do this type of work, because that's what I am aspiring to hold myself to. And if I'm not being, I want somebody to tell me that I'm not being, because that, I mean, my goal now is to just help people find this work. It never was my goal until I guess a few months ago, and it just feels like that's what I'm supposed to do. And I try not to put it in people's faces, because I know that is not what you want to do. So just by being an example, if somebody resonates with it, then they'll say something to me, and if they don't, then they won't.
Yeah. Well, maybe that can connect to it, because part of the next question is like, what are you grateful for in all of this and who you've become? And also, how do you share it with others? So maybe you can tell us more specifically, because that's kind of what you're describing, right?
I mean, I'm grateful for everybody who's played a role in my life. I mean, down to, the ex-girlfriends that we didn't end well, to the ones we did end well. Everybody who's played a role to show me my shit and to get me to where I am today, and those who will continue to get me to where I'm going. I guess that is truly what I'm grateful for.
I said the same thing. That it's the people who did the work for me or before me, so I could benefit from it. And resonating with the Chiron archetype, seeing the sacredness of the journey of being wounded and healing from that, and then teaching, and not like that's an end point, but it's a continual process. And I'm also grateful for my loved ones that are willing to call me out on my shit, especially if they set an example. And to my daughter, you know, just being a mother and having that experience in this lifetime, and how that saved my life, and how I was able to show that love, like actually experience that love in my own body and show that love to her to help me heal myself.
Beautiful.
I think I echo Aaron's sentiment of being grateful for everyone who's ever come along, good, bad, indifferent, asshole. I get a lot of assholes, and you guys know some of them. You've been witness. But I'm grateful to be able to see that. You know, to be able to see the big picture and understand that that's just all part of the game. It's all part of the plan, and that there's life that goes on after that. And of course, I'm grateful to you guys to be able to have these conversations in such a mature and adult way, but also in a way that's not condescending and clinical, because that's I've done that. I'm over it. It doesn't work for me. It worked for a while. It got me to a certain point, but I still need to grow. And this is my therapy right here. So thank you all for being a part of that, and witnessing, bearing witness, and hopefully reminding me of where I've been and how far I've come, and also calling me out on my shit too. So I love you guys.
Love you.
I love you too. Part of my infinite love medicine is this silly ability I have. My therapist told me that this was my actual superpower, is the ability to find good in anyone. And I think it goes like, I think the deeper aspect of that's what actually is helpful to people when it's, and hopefully this is not ever harmful to me now that I know how to have better boundaries, but is to truly accept people exactly where they're at. So this is how I try to share this with other people, like not only trying to be a good example. I think that's the most powerful way you can encourage other people to travel a path of emotional and spiritual health, but also like this radical form of love where you don't try to change anyone. This is not something I'm capable of all the time. I'm for some reason more capable of it with my students than with other adults, which is something that I'm working on. But accepting people exactly where they're at, because that's what all of us needed at some point when we were struggling on the path as well, is some people who just loved us through it. And I think that's a really powerful way to share kind of encapsulation of a lot of these messages in a way that people can actually grow from, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And I guess I hope it's obvious that I'm grateful for all of you and for everyone who loved me along the way to get here as well. And I'm grateful that I've come to a place where I love myself.
You're awesome.
You're awesome.
You are.
Is there anything, I'm sorry, I lost track of who answered what, but is there anything anyone else wanted to say about how they share things with other people or what they're grateful for?
I think, well, I don't know that I need to repeat it, but I will. But you said it, so I'll just echo it, because I think it's important to, just be the example and shine your light, but don't force it. I've learned too many times it's not worth it.
Like, don't be fake.
Well, don't force it on others.
Oh, right.
You can only do so much, and if you're like to the point where you're like telling them what they need to do, or posing in a way that's not natural so that they'll notice what you're doing. And I speak from experience because this is what I've done. And it happens all the time in the spiritual and emotional community, of people going, hey, I'm enlightened, look, this worked for me, look at me. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It might for a little while, but soon you become aware that that everybody has their own way, and you might as well just work your own program, work your own system, and people will take what they like and leave the rest. And that's just the best. I think it works the best that way. You don't need to put a whole lot of effort into setting an example. If you're doing, if you're working your stuff, if you're working on it, if you're really dedicated to yourself, you don't really need to force anything. It just comes naturally.
Yeah, I think that's part of that thing we were trying to touch on earlier too, of like being open about your faults or being vulnerable about like, yeah, my daughter just died and now I'm going to cry. So, I'm not going to pretend like I'm detached or above something just to like uphold whatever spiritual idea I have of myself or something. Is that kind of what you're talking about too?
Yeah, somewhat. Some of it's like, and I've caught myself in, doing that. I still do it. Being like, oh, well, I've totally been there and I know exactly what they need to do. So I'm going to say it. And sometimes it does need to be that. Like, again, in moderation, in the moment, what's right. That may have been right. But in general, as a practice of, being like, hey, this is what you need to do on a constant basis, people will get sick of that.
Nobody learns from being told.
No, especially not me.
We had a moment like that earlier today when we just checked in, You were talking to me about some things and I was like offering solutions, and then I had to check in and be like, do you want me to just listen or do you want me to say these things? Just in that moment, you can be aware and feel in, like maybe I'm pushing my own agenda here, and it's not a big deal to just check in, And I checked in and you were like, nope, that's what I needed, and
Yep.
that's how we roll.
Ask questions. Questions are so powerful and underused.
And it's okay to ask questions. It's not a big deal.
No.
Like you're
It's really helpful for
infringing on
everyone.
someone. Yeah. It's not like you're, it's your right. It's your absolute right to ask questions. And it's okay.
Hallelujah.
And that's a struggle in relationships, is not knowing when somebody wants your help and your logical guidance, or when they just want you to listen.
Yeah.
So, and I know that I think the male tends to always want to offer solutions because they want to solve the woman's problems, and usually the woman just wants somebody to listen. And I'm not trying to stereotype, but I think I think
it's true.
That's
it is.
It's true in my experience.
So it's always good to ask if you're unsure, or if you just want to practice awareness around that. Just be like, hey, is this a situation where, or even after what they say, after you listen, maybe ask, do you want me to offer, guidance or a logical way I would go about this? And like you were saying, ask questions.
Yeah. Are we brainstorming here, or are we doing a bitch session?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, feeling in.
Or both. All right. So where are you guys going on this path of mental, emotional, and spiritual truth, or where do you hope to end up And how are you going to get there, and how will you know that you're there?
Wow.
You know the answer to that already. There's no end, and I'm just trying to be less of a dick.
I feel like you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
I actually don't. I feel like the last question is almost a trap. Like, how will you know when you get there? I feel like if you think you know that you got there, you probably fucked up.
Totally.
I've arrived.
Like, I didn't mean it to be a trap, but I'm reading it now and I'm like, what the hell is that question?
I think also, I think if you're aware that you will never know, then you know. You know, like, it's a paradox. Like,
Yeah.
if you know, then you don't know. But if you know you don't know, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like wisdom is knowing that you know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's funny, I wrote that paradoxes are the norm these days, you know? Like everything is proceeding like so quickly, but also so slowly, and being present with each moment and not beating myself up, you know, or making a huge deal or ignoring or whatever, just getting out of my own way. It just kind of flows.
God, today that is like the 5th time that get out of your own way has come up in my life. And especially in the context of like getting out of the way of like your higher spiritual self to work through you. So that's like a trend that I just had to point out because you just said it again.
And I
So
do
you know
want
what
to
that
say
means,
that
right?
Yes. I need to do that.
I do want to say that if that feels like something that you recoil from, like get out of your own way, if that feels like, ugh, then there's still trauma in there. Like, and it's, you can't do it yet, and that's all right, you know? So if it feels like that's bullshit or you get angry when someone says that, then it's time to like look at being more compassionate and more aware about what's actually going on inside of you. And then that's how you get to the other side where what was pathological over here is now functional.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to end up saying the same thing as you, but and I'm going to be brief and purposely vague about this, but the most powerful moment of my life was a moment in which I was struggling against something very deeply profound. And I was, let's just describe it as like I was winning or what I was accomplishing my task or my goal or whatever. And in the moment, it was very heated. It was pushing, pushing, pushing. And everything had to be like perfectly pushed to even get like a tiny modicum of progress. But I was progressing. But I realized in that moment that the only real way that I could progress and overcome this thing was to literally 100% let go. This has actually happened like 2 times in my life. And in the moment that I 100% let go was the moment that that thing was overcome or defeated. And I think that's kind of the essence of that, like getting out of your own way.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in the everyday, that message is that like the more you try to kind of like push a certain outcome and make everything align perfectly in order for that to happen, perhaps that's not always the best way, and to just like let things flow can be more effective.
Yeah, forcing solutions is counterproductive.
Right. Yeah. So, anything else that anyone wants to say about the where you hope to end up or how you're proceeding and getting there?
I think I think I want to make a statement just to maybe keep myself on track and maybe use this to keep me honest. Is I want to keep working on this, and I want to do it, you know, in a place that's more um, visible. Um, you know, I do the internal work, but I tend to take a lot of breaks, and I think maybe they're not so healthy breaks. You know, I do it because I get pissed off or exhausted, which that means that I need to rest, yes, but also it's avoidance. So, you know, making a more public statement would help me. So, you know, I want to see myself to to being a more whole person, healthier, you know, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. Um, and you know, just developing these friendships and relationships that I have now, because they are extremely deep and important already. And I can only imagine how much of an impact that, you know, will not only make in my own life, but in others, to create a greater love matrix. So
Love Matrix for the win.
yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
all net. Whoosh. That's beautiful.
All right, then I'm going to ask you guys what your final words of wisdom might be if you had to summarize it, which is almost impossible. But what would you kind of like nutshell for people to send out to the listeners in the Eyes Open Facebook group or on the Corey Schwarman YouTube live stream, or those who are listening later to the Rogueways podcast? For all of our listeners, what do you want them to take away ultimately?
I think it's important to remember that all of these things that we're listing, and actually some of them I'd like to put in the comment section under here too, are all tools. You know, tools that work, tools that don't work, tools that burn you, tools that heal you. They're all there for us to try out to see what works, but ultimately they're tools. And getting lost in that mindset of that thing's going to help me or that thing's going to fix me, instead of realizing that you need to turn back in, like this is where it's at. So a little bit of time out there, a little bit of time in here, just increments, playing with it, getting to the point where you feel safe enough to just go back to being playful, which is terrifying for me at least, you know, like, oh, like what's that about? But this is a beautiful, beautiful journey that we're here on, and it has its horrors and it has its gorgeous moments, and all of that is medicine. All of that is the deep, dense soil that we are meant to grow in.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's good.
Who wants to go next?
You ready, Aaron?
I like to go last, but Kara's giving me those eyes. She wants me to go, so I will.
Do it.
It's important to realize that everybody is different, and your human. If people get their human design chart, you will see that how you are made up. Everybody's different. Everybody interacts with energy different. Everybody communicates differently, whether it's externally or taking in or learning or taking in communication, processing, interacting with divine energies or anything like that. Everybody's different. So everything we've said here some things may work for something like Leela said, some things may not. That's important to realize. So it's not one size fits all. These are just some tools, like she said. It's important to start off by making an intention, whatever it is that you want to start working on. If this is something that you want to aspire to, and start slow. There's no rush. We're not going anywhere. You're in this plane of existence, whatever it is. And the key is consistency of effort. Because if you can maintain even if it's just a little bit each day, that's going to be something sustained and will make change. But if tomorrow you want to change a ton of things and then the next 3 days you do nothing, then you already forgot and you're not making a change. And I think how long does it take to change a habit? I don't even know that number, but I know the number 7 years has been talked about to establish a change or to change every cell in your body, to remove, or as Alexander likes to say, but it's also said in a previous podcast, every 7 years, your cells change. So theoretically, you're not the same person that you are 7 years ago. So if you had a trauma back when you were 2 and you're now 34, like myself, I am not that person. And just realizing that helps and goes a long way to creating a perspective. I mean, it also helps to work on that stuff, but just realizing that helps you to no longer be a victim, I think, my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that.
And then
Sorry.
Thank you. No, I was just going to rattle off the things I said I would mention. Of course, the Wise podcast, you can go to wise-wise.com or the Facebook group. And I guess anything I mentioned, I'll just put links down below. We also have a Facebook group that we're trying to foster this community where we can have discussions like this, where we can be vulnerable and trust people not to judge us, whether they do or not, it doesn't matter, but just feel like it's a safe space to discuss these things. But I know with somebody starting off, they're going to have their guards up and not want to share. So we just want to create a community where people can be open and ask questions. So we do have a Facebook group. It's still new. There's not a lot of interaction, but we're trying to find people who are open and willing to initialize that. And then, like I've mentioned a lot, the human design chart and the destiny cards. And I actually have this is a destiny card reading it starts with your birth year to your next birth year. And I have a video of me going through what this has in it. So I will try to move it over from the Wise Facebook group over into this Facebook group. I think I can, as Thomas the Tank Engine once said. So I will try to do that. But I mean, really valuable information where it goes through your cards on every 52-day cycle of your year. There's 7 of them. And again, I cover in the video, so I won't try to take up too much time. And so the human design stuff and the destiny cards, there are websites out there that offer a lot of the information for free. Now, Alexander has been studying this stuff for 15 to 20 years, and he has his own take based on his experiences. And again, Alexander is the guy I do the Wise podcast with. It's basically his life philosophy. And a lot of it is based on the Hermetic principles. So his perspective on it is a little different than what you'll find out there. To me, it's a lot more insightful than what I find from a book. I have a couple of the books, the human design books, and they're just so hard to read. They're like college level. So if you want your stuff, reach out to me or join the Wise. It is going to cost you a little bit of money to get that, because it does take time to plug all that information in and get you that stuff on PDF. That's it.
I just want to say that I found that those things were incredibly helpful. Like it's on my list of things that I used: human design, esoteric astrology, and I did have some work done with Alexander, and it was really helpful. And my granddaughter was born less than 3 weeks ago, and I did her human design and her astrology chart like since then. Like I'm like, okay, I want to know this stuff like ahead of time. So they're really good frameworks for self-knowledge and self-awareness, and that's all we've been saying through this whole podcast is that's where you need to invest. So use the tools, and they're worth the money if you can afford it.
What's your final take, Kara?
Do it.
So I found that for me, always listening to my heart is, without fail, the best way to understand a situation, anything. So always listen to your heart, always. There's going to be distractions, and there's going to be complications and misunderstandings, but your heart will always tell you the truth, always. In my experience, that's just what I've come to know. And do the work. Actually do the work. You can say that you're posting your memes and posting things on Facebook. I do it all the time, and I have to check in with myself. Am I actually doing the work internally? And that's, not up to anybody else but me. Don't shame yourself ever, because shame is, in my experience, really detrimental. I know there's some who might argue at a certain level it's necessary, but I've been shamed enough in my life to know that it doesn't lead to anything fruitful or good or effective or worthwhile. And also know that you're powerful enough to and wise enough to be your own guru. You don't have to trust in anybody else to tell you what to do. You know, everything you know is inside of you.
Mhm.
Amen. You guys are so good at this. I just want to add to that a heap of wisdom that you are literally never alone, which might creep you out when you're going poop. Let's bring poop up for like the fifth time.
Get that out of
Aaron's favorite.
the
But
in a book, everyone poops. You know?
but in your dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to describe that, when you really truly feel like you are maybe like abandoned or no one understands you, because in the end, really no one does except you, which sounds terrifying and horrible, but it's kind of a freeing truth. And even then, in that space, you're not alone, because there's something higher than you, in my belief, that or you, your higher version of yourself, or however you want to call that. Some people call it God. Some people call it the all. Some people call it the source. Some people call it anything that is helpful. And it doesn't really matter. But I believe that that exists. And I believe that that is similar to following your heart. Like there's a voice inside of you that always knows truth. And it never leaves you. So you're never alone. So that is going to bring it to a close. Friends at home and everywhere. And this has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the lovely Leela Marie. Thank you, Leela.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
The heart-filled Kara Shively. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
And the balanced Aaron Keith. Thank you, Aaron. And
Verajuice.com.
me. Oh, right. The shirt. Illuminati. Nice.
You're so Illuminati.
And I am your host, Lindsay, aka Corey Sharman. That's my pen name. And while it's nearly impossible to know truth, it's been a theme in my life to follow the wise words of my late sage teacher, Morgan Livingston, who said, "Hold truth in one hand and hold the other hand open for the truth that will replace it." And this has been a theme lately. And the more we cling to a truth, the more likely it is we need to let it go. Society may have provided us with so many truths about mental, emotional, and spiritual realms, and they may have served us all from time to time. And society may have occluded our path to finding even more appropriate truths in these realms. I, for one, can never stop searching for more and more truth, and I know you're all tripping down that path with me, and I love you for it. So seek out what serves you and seek to serve others when you find it. Please join us again next Sunday when we explore the non-locality of consciousness with guests as yet to be determined. I've heard that perhaps a certain Misha might be joining us to discuss that. And if you're interested in that, in being a guest on that panel, please hit me up in the Facebook group, or you can email me at corysharman@gmail.com. That's QUORRISCHARMYN, corysharman@gmail.com. That's also my website if you want to go there to check things out. And until then, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.